turning my cell phone off. I got nothing going on. Just so for productivity, if we could turn it off for a bit. You want to come? No, sure.
I would like to.
Come for your phone. Yeah, what is it on, 80?
What are you doing?
I was asking people to sign in.
Yeah, and if you could sign in when you have a few minutes, there's going to be a handout. I want to introduce to you, many of you know Rabbi Cohn. Rabbi Cohn has joined the CRC close to 3 years ago, and he works very closely. I work very closely with Rabbi Cohn. Rabbi Cohn previously worked for the OU, and he worked very closely with the Dayanim there as far as OU policy and halacha. And if you ever see the OU policy, you know, when it comes to halacha, it's Rabbi Cohn who is behind it. Rabbi Cohn is doing the same type of structure here in the CRC, doing halachic basis, putting it into writing. And Rabbi Cohn worked with us. We went over our Shabbos Catering guidelines from what we had beforehand, made some changes, organizing it differently, and went through different sveikas or shilas that we had with Rav Schwartz this past weekend too. So, without further ado, as they say, here's Rabbi Cohn.
Thank you, Rabbi Zimmer. What we're going to do is like this. It's my weakness. I don't know that I have to write everything down. So what I'm going to say now is all written out, and we're going to hand it out to you. And for some people, they'd rather follow along as we read, and some people would rather just listen and then use it later as their notes. But literally, whatever's in here is what that's what you're going to hear from me.
And eventually, I just want to say, we have our Shabbos guidelines from Mashgiach, and this will be it. And from other questions that you hear from today, you could have missed something. Now, so this will not be the final version. Well, possibly it will be, but there might not. Okay.
You see that we're dividing our talk this morning into 4 parts. Really, it's really going to be 2 major subjects. There's going to be a whole couple of things we're going to talk about first, the first 3, and then the big one afterward, which is cooking and warming food for Shabbos. Okay? We're going to talk about the first 3 groups first. The cooking and warming takes up the bulk of what we're going to discuss this morning. Okay? And you should please all feel free to speak up. We want to hear what you think, and we're going to incorporate that further into the next version. We already had some thoughts from one of our Shabbos Mashgiachim. They didn't make it in here yet, but they will. He said, well, what do you do about this and this and this? And that should be in here. As much as we can, we'd want to include it. Okay. The first talk thing we talk about is just hashkacha, which is pretty much the standard things we do, not so directed to Shabbos. And of course, nothing starts before Mashgiach shows up. And in a Shabbos job, it's a little different than in a restaurant or a caterer because at the commissary, because everyone's bringing their stuff into the location to prepare for Shabbos. Usually the caterer shows up a couple hours before Shabbos. He gets to work, setting up his tables, putting his food down, and the Mashgiach's got to be there beforehand. Mashgiach is expected to be there to show up before anybody else does. Since the food has been transported and brought from elsewhere, then he needs seals. In a restaurant, things are not sealed within the place itself, but those things need to be sealed. And we have a rule that everything has to be in the commissary everything has to be at the event before Shabbos begins. There may be cases that in din it might be permitted to bring things on Shabbos. Those cases are few and far between. So as a matter of policy, nothing is allowed to show up on Shabbos. Okay? Even if halachically there might be reasons why it is, everything's got to be there beforehand. There are too many ways that things can go wrong and too many problems. So everything's got to be at the event before Shabbos starts. Go ahead.
Everything's got to be at the event. Pardon me. Everything has to be transported either before or after Shabbos.
Before, but we're talking about an event that's happening on Shabbos.
Okay.
For an event on Shabbos. If something's happening after Shabbos, then that's sort of like out of our range over here.
Yes.
We'll talk a drop about Motzei Shabbos in a minute, but really it's with things that are happening on Shabbos, we had just recently. There was a kiddush going on, and they ran out of ice. Okay, and they sent someone out to buy ice. Okay, so when that ice showed up at the event, the mashgiach told them they can't use it. Okay, whether halachically they were or not allowed to use it sort of was not important, because there are some cases that you can send someone, but most cases you can't. So the mashgiach knew the ice showed up. He just said, you can't use that ice. That's it. Nothing can come on Shabbos. Everything's got to be there from before. Okay. Now, another difference about being in an out of your own, commissary, out of your own location, is that you may need to seal the place up or lock the doors up when you walk out of the door on Shabbos. Okay, come Friday night, they had a meal, it ends at 9 o'clock. Okay, the mashgiach and everybody packs out. Okay, well, the mashgiach's got to lock up behind himself as a way to keep the kitchen secure and kosher until he comes back the next morning. We do have an exception to that rule, and the exception to that rule is when the event is happening in a shul or another location that's really basically a Jewish kosher location, then in that case, we do not require the people to lock the kitchen up, even though there are people within the shul that don't eat kosher. Meaning there might be a custodian. There are people cleaning crews in the shul who don't eat kosher, we would not let them into our kosher kitchen, but we don't need to lock up the door for that. Okay, so for example, in Kins, the custodian there is not Jewish, but they don't lock up their kitchen on Friday night, even though there's food cooking there overnight. Okay? If for your curiosity, the reason for that is that the only time we need to lock or seal something is when somebody might have a reason to take it. They have a benefit to take it. We don't think they're out there to get us. They're trying to, catch us and purposely give us something not kosher. We seal things up because we think someone may have something to benefit. So, for example, I make a corned beef sandwich and I send it out as a delivery to someone's house. We have a concern that the delivery person who doesn't keep kosher might want this corned beef sandwich and would switch it for the not kosher one, which is not as good. Okay? That's why we have to have it sealed, so we don't have to be concerned that he'll switch it to get the benefit. In this case, Rabbi Schwartz said, what would we be concerned of? If the custodian wants some of the chunk that's cooking there, well, just take it. He doesn't have to switch it. There's nothing to be concerned of. What does he have? It's not an example where we'd say, maybe he'll want the kosher better than the not kosher, and he'll switch the kosher on. If he wants it, he'll just take a bowl out and walk out with it himself. Okay, so in places that are really a kosher Jewish location, and the only person in and out is a custodian who's there all the time, we don't require them to lock it up.
So these people do come in, right, on a Shabbos?
Now, during the daytime, that's true.
Right.
But during the daytime, there are always people in that kitchen. That our concern is not really during the daytime. Even if
3 o'clock
the
in the morning.
mashgiach walks out, but the custodian lives there or has the keys to the place or cleans up at night, we allow him to work there.
I'm worried about if it's a big kitchen, milks and fleischiks with the custodian, that he's going to take a milk spoon, take out some cholent, and then wash the spoon, put it back.
So you think if the kitchen would have both milchids and fleischiks in it?
Or even pirate fleischiks, whatever.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. But that's not so common. I'm saying usually it's either one or the other, but it's interesting. We could ask that to Rabbi Schwartz. I don't think that he would care about that, just from our judging of our speaking to him before, but we could ask him that question, whether it's should we worry about if there's two, setups in the kitchen. Okay. Okay, now, there's a rule, what we had mentioned about Motzoi Shabbos, which is when an event is going to be happening on Motzoi Shabbos, after Shabbos is over, then we have rule, you're not allowed to prepare on Shabbos for after Shabbos. Okay, so we have two concerns. We don't want the staff to prepare on Shabbos for after Shabbos, and secondly, we don't want guests to be driving on Shabbos to an event. If an event is scheduled for half an hour after Shabbos is over, then there are people who are not religious who will end up driving to the event. Okay, it's a half an hour after Shabbos, so the people who live locally will come over after Shabbos, but someone else who's not as careful will drive in. So for that, we have two times that we use. They're called oven time and
Serving time.
serving time. Okay, our oven time it's 52 minutes after Shabbos, which is after sunset, which is to say, you can't put. Nothing goes into the oven until 52 minutes after sunset. Okay, at that point, Shabbos is over, and at that point, they can start cooking, doing those kind of preparations.
I have a question for you. What happens at 52? Your minute is, let's say, 72 minutes, but, the food has to be visually sterile.
Usually the food is cooked beforehand, and they're just reheating the food anyways.
So they can turn it on themselves?
Well, then you got kind of the other thing is that if they're not going to turn on the ovens till after Shabbos, you're not going to have the food in the oven for another half an hour.
A lot of them keep it on open.
So then you try to, that's the question. I mean,
But he's saying in the case, let's say they did, right? And you keep Shabbos 60 minutes, 72 minutes, and they're starting at 52 minutes. So it's in such a case that if they do turn it on, then it's not going to get, within 15 minutes, it's not hitting 500 anyways. I would lower it a little bit, wait a few minutes, and then put it back up.
You mean when you're 72 minutes?
Right,
Don't
exactly.
we have a whole thing about do I turn on the oven in the first place then?
Okay. Well,
I'm saying that as a rule, we would not let him turn on the oven.
That's my point.
That's true. Right, that's true. So it's an interesting question. If a mashgiach who keeps a longer amount of time, I guess should deal with that. Let me say privately. Okay, we'll work out something for that mashgiach. As a rule, most of our mashgiachim at that point would turn on the fire. Someone who keeps a longer time would work out an exception for the person, which is let them put it in and then he'll adjust it later, or leave it on from before Shabbos. It's like a sort of a more local. We'll deal with that privately rather than from globally. The rule right now is 52 minutes. But then there's the second half of that rule is the serving time is that no food could be served until 2 hours after Shabbos. So Shabbos, if sunset was at 5 o'clock, nothing can be served until 7, and that's the point of that is the event is not called till 7, then people don't leave their homes until how much time beforehand. We don't have to be concerned about people driving in on Shabbos.
and also the pressurizing in the kitchen. Okay, mistakes would happen also. People would be rushing. Rabbi, let me do this. Let me do this. Here they have the time. And everybody here knows who has done Shabbos. There are times that we will move the time a little bit earlier for whatever the reason is. For that fact, they'll start with cold hors d'oeuvres beforehand, but it's within reason that a person can get there after Shabbos. We're not talking 20 minutes after Shabbos. We give it a reasonable amount of time. But B'derech Klal, that is our policy.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about the 48 minutes for cold food?
What about?
We had a policy that we had to wait 48 minutes to start working with the cold food.
No,
same
52.
thing.
Anything to do with food is 52.
But it was 48 minutes for cold food.
No, that's never,
Before my days.
I never heard that.
74 minutes. Okay.
All right. But that could have been a rule.
The CRC other
Okay,
time
you know-
policy, which is
Any
50
food.
minutes.
It's food.
You
50.
need to adjust your 2 minutes, but include everything. So if you're doing cold hors d'oeuvres, then they should be ready in advance.
Right, they played it
What
before.
did you say about 40 minutes? I want to check something. I have a feeling I know what he's talking about. Can you just write that?
48 minutes.
Okay, go to, fine, okay.
Everyone, hang on.
Okay, good. Now we have what?
You missed number 5
What was number 5?
on the first page.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. I'll get back there. 1 second. Let me just finish this one. Thank you. There is an exception to this rule is that we're discussing here an event that happens only on Motzei Shabbos. Okay? If you're having an event that went from Shabbos through to Motzei Shabbos, okay? This Shabbos they're having their good convention. Okay? The people are there on Shabbos, and they're going to be there on Motzei Shabbos also. Okay? We're not certifying that event, but were we to be certifying that event, we would let them serve food an hour after Shabbos. And the thinking being, we're not talking about people driving in. We're not thinking about people who have to set up and get a whole caterer get himself up and running in 1 hour after Shabbos. We're talking a thing that's been running for days and days. So it's just a matter of they have to just pull out some food. So we would let them serve that even 1 hour after Shabbos. Okay. Ken pointed out there I missed is we have a rule about trucks. Okay, which is to say food has to be there as we said before Shabbos. Food has to always be there before Shabbos. But if sometimes a caterer wants to work out of a truck, okay, basically just a big storage bin, either refrigerated or not refrigerated, just a big storage bin, and that's okay, assuming that there's some kind of an area for as far as the carrying. But there's what we call a marasayin, that people who look at this may get a wrong impression. They see a truck standing there. It says the name of the caterer in big letters on it, and people have this impression that the caterer showed up on Shabbos, okay? Or that the truck's going in and out to pick up things.
Or move from the front to the back.
People have all kinds of imaginations as to what they saw. I saw the truck. It wasn't there last night, and it came there this morning, and they have all kinds of ideas of what happened. So because of that, the rule is the truck needs to be inconspicuous. It needs to be in a way where it does not, so to speak, in everyone's face. It needs to be in the back of the shul, off to the side someplace where it doesn't make everybody who walks by notice it. Because people have this wrong impression, and they have all these ideas of what's happening. And either they'll think we let it, or they'll think they should do it, or all kinds of ideas. So the truck needs to be sort of out of the way. Okay, not parked right in front of the shul, or something like that where it's very obvious.
Or park in front of the shul and take the tires off, you know what I'm saying? And no one can have a time.
Since you addressed that, what about you finished the event on Shabbos, and the caterer wants, the goyim, for their convenience, not because the caterer wants to pick up and move everything.
We'll come at that.
Oh.
Coming in the next section. It is coming. It's a good question, but it's coming in the next section. Okay, the last for this section is that a mashgiach who's overseeing an event on Shabbos is out there. He's the Lone Ranger. He's all out by himself. There isn't Rabbi Eisenbach, Rabbi Schwartz, anybody else to fall back on to call up. What?
Yeah, no cell phone.
No.
No cell phones. There's no one to call back and
But
say.
they wouldn't answer anyway.
So,
yeah.
Can't you text with your elbow?
there we go. So
Left elbow.
and for better or for worse, shilohs do come up. So the advice we give people is, if a shiloh comes up, at the event there's usually some sort of a rabbi of the shul, a rabbi who's a guest. Find someone who seems to be qualified to answer the question, and just do what he says. Okay, Rabbi Eisenbach had it recently. Someone they got an event, the whole to do with the fires went out. There was no challah. They didn't know what to do. So they found the rabbi there. They found a rabbi of the shul there, and they said to the rabbi, "What should we do?" Okay, and what the answer was is not important. Okay, whatever the rabbi said, the rabbi took responsibility for the situation. He said, "Well, in this case, what you should do is as follows," and whatever he said, and that's what they did. Okay, that's the best you can do in the situation. I mean, we don't want the Mashiach is not supposed to sit there and open up Masechta Shabbos and start learning and figuring out what he's supposed to do. So usually there's the rabbi of the shul, there's someone to ask the shiloh to, and to get the best we can out of it, even if it may not be exactly what the CRC would have done, but it's as good as we could do. Okay.
And you're right, there will be situations where you're out in Yatsim plots.
I'd say that's
And-
more than that.
Right, well, right, it depends on the caterers, but there are a lot of the caterers will go out to one of these, the shows where you would want to ask the rabbi, and then you have to use your judgment. The power invested with me at that time, you're deputized. There are times I have to do it too, where I can't get a hold of Schwartz, I can't get, if I have it, then I'll use, you'll use your seichel and say, with this, what should I do?
My father, I used to say this, my father was a shul rabbi, and he said, if a rabbi makes a mistake once, that's okay. If he makes a mistake, the same mistake twice, then he's not a good rabbi. So after the first time it happened, you did what you could, you did as best as you could. But then you got to go back and ask somebody else, look into it, try to understand it. So the second time you don't make the same mistake. That's his rule. Okay, we'll finish this section. Before we move on, Tamir Lachim, does anyone have questions about this? Yes.
You have a question about the caterer working out of the truck on Shabbos if there's an Eruv?
Yes.
You have to put your own Eruv up, or you can rely on the Eruv in the community?
So assuming that it's a reputable Eruv, okay, that means that it's in a community where it's put up properly, we would accept the Eruv in that community. If you're out in the middle of no place and it's either there's no Eruv or the Eruv is not something that's you think we would find reliable, then yes, you have to put up your own Eruv. But if you ever have to put up your own Eruv, you really need to consult with somebody, because putting up an Eruv is not for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. You really have to you have to prepare and say, what are we going to do? How are we going to put up an Eruv in this place?
And we'll know way in advance if they're going to need, if they're having a party there for a whole weekend, and they're going to be in Yehupitzville, we'll know in advance. Are you bringing a truck? Is it going to be backed up? Is it fenced in? Is it in a parking lot right outside? I mean, we know.
As part of, Rabbi Eisenach and I once went to see a hotel that was going to be running an event for an extended time. And part of looking over the hotel was to see is how will we build an area. Really, it was for the guests. The guests were going to want to walk around, the outside of the, not for the caterer, the guests were going to walk around in the gardens and this and that. What did we have to do for the area? And we came back with questions to Rabbi Schwartz. We said, okay, Rabbi Schwartz, here's a couple of questions we had. How do we deal with these situations? Is this good area? Is this not a good area?
The mashgiachim have to be told which room in the community are accepted and not, because that same party you're referring to with the ice had the issue that the Rav of the Shul doesn't hold like Peterson Parhero.
Right. Okay. So
That's another issue.
Okay. So for the caterer, it's a CRC event. So Rabbi Eisenbach will answer a question for you whether
Just like the Rav might not eat a certain shita, but it's a CRC event.
So we have to follow our rules. For our caterer to carry it in, it has to be, we think the Erev is good or not good. That's
Right. And that'll be
right.
Schwartz.
Are there any Reuben in the area that aren't accepted by the CRC?
The ones that are here are all fine. the three Erevin that we know about are three.
No.
Skokie here.
Lakewood,
Okay, so that's what you said.
there's now one in Northbrook.
So I don't know about Northbrook and
No, no, I
Lakeview.
think they're up.
But answer
I don't know.
Schwartz. We haven't talked about the ones that are right in this immediate area. We talked
I know
about.
it's just about it.
We could ask them. We don't know.
Park, I don't know.
For something like that, we can.
Skokie, Lakewood, and Chicago, you're saying, but Lakeview, Buffalo Grove,
We
Northbrook,
don't. We haven't asked about those yet. We don't know anything about it.
Those are so I'm assuming that it's
Just want to cross about the road.
We passed it by Irvin Schwartz just to ask him.
Well, he was probably involved with it, but I
It's worth
know
it.
there wasn't Lakeview.
Okay. You see it when you drive down Lake Shore Drive?
Yeah, one up here.
You see when you drive down Lake Shore Drive? You see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on my phone.
You bet.
Okay. Okay.
It goes all the way to the zoo.
A quick story. It happened with Rabbi Eisenbach, and I did a event a number of years ago, and that was at a resort, and the air went down, and I actually there was a CRC mashgiach there, besides myself. He was just a guest, and I asked him what to do because I really didn't know what to do, and he said, "Announce that the air was down." So I took his advice and I announced it. And after Shabbos, I called Rabbi Eisenbach, and he asked Rabbi Schwartz. Rabbi Schwartz said I did the wrong thing, because I shouldn't have said anything. So tonight is number one, is that there was enough trees around there that possibly it didn't need an Erev in the first place.
Okay.
And if it did need an Erev, I was just putting people that would carry anyway in a position where they're going over, where they so.
But actually, what he's mentioning, if the Erev goes down on Shabbos, you should, for your interest, if the Erev goes down on Shabbos, you should tell a guy to fix the Erev. Okay? And a Jewish person can't fix the Erev, but you should tell a guy to fix the Erev on Shabbos. Okay? That's what you're supposed to do. Mishnah Berurah says, if the Erev goes down on Shabbos, there's no way to tell everybody and stop everybody from carrying this and that. You should instead find the guy and tell him to fix the Erev.
Glad I heard that.
Okay. Okay, we're on to Amir La'achim. Okay. We're on page 2, if anyone's following along. We're at Amir La'achim. Okay. Jewish people are not allowed to do malacha on Shabbos. And non-Jewish people are allowed to do malacha. They're allowed to do whatever they want to. But I'm not allowed to tell. One of the things that I'm not allowed to do is I can't tell him to do something for me. He can't. If he does something for me, I'm not allowed to take advantage of what he did. But there's one very big exception to that rule, which for us is a very relevant. There's a number of exceptions. One that's very relevant to us, which is called if a guy does something adaita d'nafshe. He does it for his own benefit. Right? He's doing something for his benefit. Then, and I gain from that. That's okay. He can't do something that's for me, but he can do something, so to speak, for himself. Okay. Now, before we get into the examples, we have a very simple rule. This is Rabbi Eisenbach's rule. The rule is really a Gemara, but it's Rabbi Eisenbach's rule. And the rule is like this. If a Jewish person can't do that thing on Shabbos, the guy can't do it either. If the Jewish person could do it, but there are different ways, I would have to do it in a very specific way, then the guy could do it any other way he wants to. If I can accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish some way, we're going to do the examples in a second. There are ways that I could do the thing, then he could do it any way he wants to. But if there's something that I can't do, I cannot turn the lights on Shabbos. There's no way I can turn the light on. There isn't any way of Heter to turn on a light on Shabbos. He can't turn the light on for me. I'll use one of the examples just to make you understand it. I can wash dishes on Shabbos in cold water. So I can say to him, Johnny, please wash the dishes. And if he uses hot water or he uses the dishwasher, that's okay. Because I can wash dishes. I can't wash dishes that way, but I can wash dishes, so his choice of how to wash the dishes, that's adaita d'nafshe. He's choosing the method that he wants to use. If it includes malacha, that's okay. Now, one exception to that rule is that even when he's doing malacha, adaita d'nafshe, he's doing it for his own, he chose how to do the malacha, he can only do that, that only is acceptable if it's done in a private area. It cannot be done in a place in what we call a base situation or a public area because people will think that I told him to do it the wrong way. Okay? So if he's washing dishes in the kitchen, no one's walking by there who will notice or will have any questions. If he's doing something in the public areas, we're going to do some examples in a second. If he's doing something in a public area, people might think that I told him to do it this way specifically, then he's not allowed to do it, even though I didn't tell him to do that. And let's do some examples to help understand these. A convection oven, in most convection ovens, has a safety feature that when you open the door, the fan and the fire go out. Then when you close the door, it goes back on. So it's a safety feature to protect the person who's opening the door. If I say to him, take out the pans of chicken out of the convection oven, I'm telling him, turn the fire off and then turn the fire back on. That's what there isn't any way for a Jewish person to open that door on Shabbos. I can't get the door open without making the fire go out and then close it without the fire going back on. So I can't tell him to do that. So the only way I can use a convection oven is if you override it so that the fire and the fan don't go on and off when you open the door. Okay. Now, I can slice meat, wash dishes, or another example, clean floors. There are ways to do that on Shabbos without violating any malacha. There are ways to do it. I can sit there with a knife and just slice the meat by myself. So if we need to slice up the cold cuts, I can say to him, go slice the cold cuts. If he uses the machine, that's okay. Because he's choosing, for him it's easier and more convenient to do it on the machine than to do it by hand. So he's allowed to do that. That's adaita denafshe. It's his choice to do it in the way that includes malacha instead of the way that doesn't include malacha. That's okay.
What if he doesn't have enough time to be able to cut the meat manually and do everything
That's
else?
a very
Now you're forcing him to.
that's correct. The caterer has to give him time to do that, so to speak. In other words, we can't say okay, we have 15 minutes left to the meal, go slice the meat by hand. He's not going to pull it off. It's not going to happen. Right? He's going to have to use the slicer. That's correct. He wouldn't be allowed to do that. But usually, this is my feeling from Rabbi Yitzchak. Usually, the caterer is not sitting. You tell me this yourselves. Is not sitting with them and say, okay, now do this, now do this, now do this. They say, look, we're eating at 11. Okay, by 11 o'clock, everything's got to be done. These are all the things we have to have done by 11. So guys, get to work. And then they know what they have to do
Whatever time
to
they
get
want
the
to
things
start
done.
also.
They get they know what they have to do to get their work done. So they time that they pace themselves what they have to do. He's not sitting over them and saying, okay, go now, right, make salad. He's just they're sort of giving him a range and saying, this is when it has to be ready. You guys know what to do.
No, never.
Okay. Now,
listen.
go
They
ahead.
don't listen anyways.
What if the
I like your case.
won't let them use the slice for Shabbos or not?
Okay, that's a very good question. But not specific to the slicer, which is if the rabbi in the shul has a rule different than what we require. Okay, if the rabbi has a rule that's different than ours, we would not be mako, do something more lenient because the rabbi has the rule. Let's say the rabbi says, I let this kind of whiskey, and the seriously doesn't, we wouldn't let it. Okay, we wouldn't be more mako than theirs. If the rabbi in the shul is more careful, more makbid, he says, you can't do this thing, out of respect to the rabbi, I believe that we would follow what he does. If the rabbi says, don't use the slicer, in my shul, I don't want you using the slicer, if he's more makbid than we are, we would, out of respect to that rabbi, would say, fine, it's okay.
Just like the rabbi in the shul says, I want everything in here yasha. Right? Even though our policy's not that way, that's what he wants. You know, the host would have, that's what they'll do.
What about the Erev? Didn't we say before the Erev we don't?
No, that's the rabbi himself doesn't carry the Erev. But okay, if the rabbi would say, I don't carry it, I don't want
And
you to
he's
bring it from
mocking
your
on all
shul.
the people that come into show also.
Some rabbis are like that. Most of the times they're not.
At one point.
Most of those people, the rabbi is not mocked to that extent. I guess that would be true. If the rabbi would say, we don't want you carrying it from the truck, I guess we would.
Trying to change it.
Okay.
Losing.
Okay, now, what we said about mopping a floor is an example where they can vacuum, you can vacuum in the ballroom when the doors are locked. Okay? But if the ballroom is open, or now there's all of a sudden people milling around, then you couldn't mop. Even though the person is mopping it at back to the after, we just said, just clean up the floors. And he chose to use a mop. Jewish people can't mop on Shabbos. He chose to mop but since he's doing it in a public place, it'll have the impression that someone may have asked him, say, please mop up the floor. You can't say mop the floor, you can say clean the floor. So therefore, in a place where there are people milling around, once the doors are open, we wouldn't allow it. Yes?
Sweet.
Is the kitchen considered, a kitchen and a shul, considered a public area as far as washing dishes?
No. The answer is no. I can't say there aren't shuls that have lots of people draining in and out, but as we'll know, the kitchen is considered like the back of the house. The kitchen is, as a rule, the kitchen is sort of off limits to people.
Just like
A lot
one
of
day.
times you wash your hands in the kitchen. A lot of times.
Right. They put a washing station out, don't they?
Not always. I've been places where they don't.
Okay,
You
but
go in
there
the
are
kitchen.
call hours. One other thing, I was speaking with Rabbi Cohn in a hotel, for example, where they have their own crew cleaning. That's, even if it's in a public area, we have no control on that. People there will not say, Oh, it's just
Well,
catering.
they have their uniforms, you can tell who they are.
That,
No,
that,
it's not that they have the uniform, it's that nobody thinks that the guests told them, please vacuum
or
the
the,
hallways
or
now.
the,
Everybody understands that they're doing their job for their own,
just
their
like they
own
go
standards.
clean the restrooms every half hour, they go ahead and they vacuum whatever it is. That's not considered public, even though it's rented out to the inn for that day.
Okay, another example. If you're serving, the waiters are walking around taking out people's orders. Okay, so for the waiter's convenience, he wants to write down how many people ordered meat and how many people ordered chicken. That's his own, that's really a da'ita d'nafshi. He's allowed to write, if that's what he wants, he could write it down. However, if he's sitting in the ballroom writing down people's orders, it looks that people are telling him, mark me down for a chicken. Okay, so therefore, he shouldn't be writing those orders down in public. He should go, when he gets back into the kitchen, then he could write it down. But in the public area, he can't. And in this, Rabbi Eisenbach actually told me just the other day, a very good idea they had. They once were doing a very big event, and they needed people to be able to write down, but they didn't want to write it down in the kitchen, so they gave them little cards, okay? Green cards for beef and red for chicken. I don't know what it was. And the waiters just collected them. They said, okay, we have, on this table 4, he put on 4 green cards, he clipped them on, and clipped on 4 red cards for how many, of each of the things he was ordering. That was just a way to sort of get around it. Okay, that was an interesting idea.
You find this when you're doing they're writing down, usually it's the same meal, it's a plated meal, and that's what it is. Usually you have this more problem when it's like a convention, and it's 4 days, they're there, like where we have the G8. And then you move
Well,
to
that's
go.
been down a case where
Am I right?
the client literally didn't do pre-orders, it was choice at the table. And we've done that with the color coding.
Right.
Although we've had when you have big events, it's usually if it's a fish or vegetarian alternative, that on their place card they'll give them something you hand
Right. It'll say on
to
it.
the waiter, so the waiter knows how many for that particular table.
Okay,
I
good.
think it's
Okay.
more like you said, conventions. More of a-
Okay, another example.
Usually we know in advance how many per table.
If it's the last day of Pesach and I want to pack up my dishes for after Pesach, I'm not allowed to do that in my house because I'm preparing for after Yom Tov. Okay, I'm packing my dishes, thank you, so I can be ready for after Yom Tov. But if the event's going on a Shabbos and they're finished their cooking on Shabbos afternoon, they're finished, and the not-Jewish people there have to pack the dishes sooner or later. I'm saying, look, it's quiet now. Why don't we pack up our dishes now? They're packing up the dishes for their convenience. I said, I'd rather do it from 2 to 4 in the afternoon than from 8 to 10 at night. Well, I might as well do it now. So that's a da'ita d'nafshi. He's doing it for his own. He's choosing to do it for his purposes. That would be okay. Now, think if you have a waiter who's not Jewish who wants to drive to the event on Shabbos. He's a waiter. That's okay. He can drive. It's his business. He's choosing to drive instead of sleeping nearby or something like that. But if I assign him to one event that's in West Rogers Park, okay, and another one that's in Buffalo Grove for tomorrow morning, okay, well, he can't get from here to there without driving. So if he's the waiter in West Rogers Park tonight and Buffalo Grove tomorrow morning, basically I'm telling him that he has to drive. Okay, so I couldn't do that to him because I'm telling him to do the malacha. But if I just tell him, show up in Buffalo Grove tomorrow morning, so without any place else, his driving is his choice, he's allowed to do it.
You're talking strictly with the caterer, with the hotel, not with the hotel.
What do you mean it wouldn't apply?
The hotel, they cater the entire thing after the...
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. If the staff that's working for the hotel, we're not done that.
Well, same
It's
thing.
not our business. We're not.
Same thing, a lot of the caterers use services. It's not their own people.
Or they don't even know who's coming.
We don't know who's coming.
That's fine, because I'm saying to the service, I need 8 guys tomorrow morning in this place. It's the service's business, who they send, how they get them.
So you might get the same guy Friday night and Shabbos day.
That wasn't my choice. That was their choice, who to send to all the different events. But if my own chef, I'm running 2 events. I send one chef to here, and the same chef to tomorrow morning. That I can do. Yes.
Like you said, if you send your own dishwashers and chefs to different places,
Correct. Okay. Okay. Now, there are other heterim for Amir al-Akam. There are other situations where Amir al-Akam might be mutter. For those you need to ask specifically. This one about da'ita d'nafshi that he's doing it for his own purposes is the one that comes up the most. There are potentially other cases when a guy can do something that I can't do myself. We can actually mention some a little later. But yeah,
Are we discussing also when they bring all the used stuff, dishes and whatnot, they wrap up and go back to the caterer?
right. So I'd mentioned that if they're packing up on Shabbos afternoon, because that's convenient.
Friday night.
Okay. So if they're packing up because it's convenient for them, okay, in other words, they would rather do it Friday night than on Motzei Shabbos. That's okay. That's their choice when they want to do that. But if there's a reason why they have to do it on Friday night, no, they wouldn't be allowed to. If,
And how late would you have to stay there to see that everything goes back to the caterer? I mean, like, do you wait till they're finished with washing the last dish or something? Or?
Yeah.
You're there till the end. When they leave, you leave.
You have to be the last one out.
okay. Okay. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Question, what if you have help from an agency that's Jewish?
Okay, I'm about to. Very good. I'm about to say that.
And then another question, what about Jewish people preparing for, on Shabbos, for the dishes to be removed for the equipment for after Shabbos? They bring it up and
We'll get to that.
Okay, we're about to say it. Very good. If there's going to be a Jewish person working at the event, a waiter, a chef, something like that, the rules are very different for that person. There's things that the staff will do, like packing up dishes, that he is not allowed to do. So if they want to bring somebody who's Jewish to the event, religious or not, the Rabbi Eisenbach and the caterer have to talk about it and just lay out the rules of what he will and will not be allowed to do. The caterer could do it. He just has to realize that if he has that person on staff, they're going to be limited in certain things they can't do.
Yeah, but they come from an agency, you don't know until that.
Okay, so if they show up and no one knows, I don't know what to tell you. But if it's one of your own people, the chef says, you know what, I have this, the caterer says, I have this chef and I really need him at the event, okay? And he's a Jewish person. We know he's Jewish. He works there, but he's not religious, then he will be more limited in what he can do. So they have to just talk about it. It can work. It can happen, but it has to just be more careful.
You've got to be told the guidelines for what he can do.
You might have to try there.
They would have to talk that out. We wouldn't let him drive, and we would, in doing his work in the kitchen, he would have to be more careful.
I just
If he
spoke
talked to everyone,
with the mashgiach this week. He said that he's doing a party somewhere, and one of the chefs is Jewish, but not from. And the other mashgiach says he knows it, and he says we gotta be like babysit him. I said you can't run a party where a mashgiach has to sit and make sure that this Jewish chef is not being machal Shabbos. I said, how do you work that way?
My experience when we've had that is that if you're going to have a case of a chef that's Jewish, they tend to be somewhat arrogant and they will purposely do something just because you told them they couldn't.
That's possible.
No, but I mean, it's a serious thing. Then it almost needs to be the case where the caterer needs to have, especially in that case, if they're working for the caterer, then the caterer shouldn't have Jewish personnel.
it would be anti-Semitic for me to tell the caterer he can't have Jewish chefs.
I was really
Like when I tell them they can't have Israeli products, that's not like an
Someone called
anti-Semite to the
Rafa'inu
company.
for a cab on Shabbos.
I do.
Yeah.
And said, make sure the driver isn't Jewish.
Yeah.
So when we picked him up at the hospital, the guy said, okay, I picked up the anti-Semites.
Right, so it's not that he can't have a Jewish chef. They just have to talk it out and understand what he'll be allowed to do and what he can't do. It's just about, and if the caterer still thinks that's reasonable, in other words, with these conditions, yes, I can still pull it off, then okay, that's his choice at that point.
chef is going to drive there. You can't tell him to come.
No, he has to stay in the neighborhood. That would be one of the guidelines. He's got to stay in your house.
What if you're out in the middle of nowhere?
Okay. Lastly,
Before you go.
go ahead.
What do we say if a
Since you're
waiter
talking
shows
about-
up, that if the agency sends a Jewish waiter that you don't know about?
There's not much we can do on that.
Go ahead.
We have no control
Well,
on it.
the waiters themselves, in general, are generally not doing anything you can't do. There might be a couple minor...
The waiters.
The waiters,
Right.
not the kitchen personnel, the waiters.
Since you're talking about Jewish chefs, I
I
found that sometimes the Goyish chefs, especially if they've been working in a kosher environment for a long time, I've had it many times, where they will sometimes second guess and sometimes they will even outguess the mashgiach. And that's a major problem.
Okay.
And just to be aware of that I worked for a place for a number of years, and one of the chefs there had a book on how to run a kosher kitchen, and he was paskening shilas without and telling me afterwards. I mean, it's a serious problem.
Okay. Lastly, in this section is that if in the summertime, sometimes the guests at the hotel will make Shabbos early. Okay, they'll make it early Shabbos. Or the shul will make it early Shabbos. So, as the way we treat the Amir Lachim at that time, what can we tell them? The non-Jewish people didn't make early Shabbos. Only the Jewish people made early Shabbos.
yourself didn't even make an early Shabbos.
So the rule for that is that until the people come back from shul, until they're 10 minutes before they come back, before everyone's streaming into the dining room to eat, the non-Jewish people can treat it like it's a weekday.
Right. For example, let's say they call them, I apologize, davening, you look at the BO, they're davening, let's say it's in a shul or in a hotel. They're davening at 6 o'clock. Shabbos really doesn't start, look, mentions not till 8 o'clock. But their meal is set for 7 o'clock. So you're expecting them to daven from 6 to 7. So you have to tell your hotel crew or whoever your kitchen crew is, Shabbos for us, Sabbath for us starts at 10 to 7. This way you give yourself a little leeway, you give them, and therefore everything's in the ovens, everything's done as if it's Shabbos already. Everything's on the black, whatever has to be done. Because when they walk in, for them, since they have hired you, you're the staff for them, it's Shabbos for them, and therefore you're servicing them.
Okay. Before we move on to food service, any more questions on Amir Lachim? Yes.
A couple specifics. Sharing of aluminum foil or
We're going to come to that. It's in the next section. Even though it has to do with Amir Lachim, it's in the next section. Okay. Any other ones?
you talk about using a slicer, because you can slice it with a knife. What about something that has to be more pureed? Like they want to make, they want to do cilantro or something, or they have to use a blender.
You can't do that.
That's correct. You have no way that you can do it, so they can't do it for you. If the slicing of meat, you could slice meat. Now, I can't slice it that fine, but the chef can. He could slice it as finely also. He could use the machine if he chooses to. Okay, but I can't make smoothies. I mean, as much as I spin it around in my cup, it's not going to be a smoothie. It's not going to work.
It's too much of a fine. We'll get to that too.
Okay, on to
We'll get to that too.
the section we call food service. Okay. In preparing food, a person, people can, we're now Jewish or not Jewish, we're out of the Amir Lachim section, okay? You can make shapes, simple shapes in your kitchen. You want to take a ice cream scooper and put out liver into ice cream, that's fine. You want to make watermelon, make a watermelon balls out of and make a boat. A boat, there we go, a boat, that's okay. You want to make a flower, you want to make a swan, okay, that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make sophisticated shapes. The simple, you want to put it into a rectangle, yeah, that you could do. If you want to make something more sophisticated, you're not allowed to do that. Okay? But in checking, we don't allow checking your vegetables on Shabbos for insects, and the reason for that is that invariably we'll end up killing some of those bugs, and therefore we don't allow it. Vegetable checking happens. It's supposed to be done before Shabbos. Okay. For the next two, we have a special. Go ahead.
Is there an exception to that rule?
To which rule?
They forgot to check the legs.
Maybe I just put letters.
I guess if they were very careful, we have to think about that one. It's a.
So you shouldn't even spot check.
There's a secondary question. There's a barrier question, but yeah, if they did it very carefully, we have to think about that. We really don't. We discourage it. Can I say?
But you're saying, right, but again, the rule, it's called Murphy's Law. It's bound to happen. So we have to investigate. That's why we're writing all these notes here on the side.
Yes. You should not.
Checking out for me too.
Yes, you shouldn't think for a minute that I will remember even one of your questions when we're finished. I won't remember a blessed thing, but Rabbi Aronin is keeping notes of it. I will not remember absolutely a blessed thing when we're finished. Okay.
There aren't that many caterers that are going to permit strawberries to be cut and washed and checked on Friday for a Shabbos day. I mean, you might as well just throw them out. I mean,
They're not checking, they're just washing them. It's not...
We'll think about this specifically. We'll mention strawberries specifically, because there, it could be cutting them off as a way you got rid of most of your bugs in there. We have to think about that. It's a fair question. No answer to that. Okay. For the next two, these are two things that you're not allowed to do. Okay. They're called boirer and teichin. You're not allowed to do them. But there's a special rule. I'm going to explain in a second what it is. But there's a special rule that if it's close to the meal, you're allowed to do these things. Okay? You're allowed to do that. Okay, that is. Boirer means you're not allowed to separate bad from good. Okay, and the rule is, if you do it close to the meal, you take the good out of the bad, and you don't use a tool that's made specifically for being boiler, you don't use a tool that's like a slotted spoon that's made specifically to drain out liquids and hold the solids behind. If you don't use something special, then you're allowed to be boiler. Okay? But that has to be done close to the meal. Now, close to the meal is judged it's judged by how much time it takes to prepare for this meal. So if in my house there are 3 people eating and it takes us 20 minutes to prepare, so for 20 minutes beforehand, in our preparation, we can take the good from the bad. If I'm preparing for 500 people, and it takes 2 hours to prepare or 3 hours to prepare, that whole range of time is considered close to the meal, and I'm doing preparations for that meal. However, if I'm on Friday night, I can't do preparations for the morning meal because that's not close to the meal. I'm doing that for tomorrow's meal. I can't do boiler for the next morning. That's good. Thank you. I can't do boiler for the next morning. So, peeling vegetables is an example of boiler. Peeling vegetables is separating the better part. That's the cucumber, the inside, the white part from the green part, the peel, which is no good. I can only do that if it's close to the meal. Okay, so that has to be. That is to say, for most people, that means is what?
I'm just saying, with dinner cloud, again, we're going to worry about those situations. Usually the caterers have all the vegetables already, the pre-cut, it's all ready to roll.
Okay, fine, that's fine.
But this is in case, again, there's an emergency. They forgot the cucumbers, and now they got to use their fresh cucumbers from the hotel.
But that would probably not happen the night before.
Right.
Okay. So they can do it
That
when
would
they're
happen 10 minutes before the salad go out.
When they're
when they're getting ready for that, they can. And within that, there are those who hold that a peeler is considered a tool made specifically for separating things. That's not the CRC's position. Okay, there's different opinions on that. So we would allow a peeler, but it can only be done if it's close to the meal because of the question that it would be potentially burned.
Why is it not?
Why is what not?
Not a tool for...
Because some people hold that it is, like you're saying. Rabbi Schwartz said he views it as just a sophisticated knife. Okay, and a knife. It's not a tool for burger. Is a straightener. It's meant to let the liquids through and hold the solids behind. That's a slotted spoon. Those are tools that are made for being burger. He holds this is just a knife on a handle. That's how he said.
If we're having an event at a shul where you know that the rabbi is very machmir, do we have to go through? Are we obligated to go through all the tools?
No. If the rabbi tells you, or I mean, we're not hiding from him. If he tells you, oh guys, peelers. No, we don't do peelers over here. I don't let peelers. They say, okay, if you don't let peelers, we don't. But we're not going to send him the guidelines beforehand. Okay. Now another example is that when you dice something very finely, that's the malach of toichin, to dice something. That also is not allowed to be done. It's a machlokes. There are some who hold that can be done close to a meal. That the issue of cutting stuff up very finely.
Like cilantro for the guacamole.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So to cut it very finely, it's a machlokes. You for sure can't do it far from the meal. It's a machlokes if you can do it close to the meal. Okay, and therefore we would allow someone who's not Jewish to do that. He can be samach on the mekilim, and he can, but he has to do it again close to the meal. So if he's making his guacamole, he'd have to do that close to the meal within the range of time that it takes to prepare. Just like butter, the same set of rules has to be done within that range that's considered when we're preparing for this coming meal rather than for like the next meal. Okay? Two other things is that there are questions about the next two things I'm going to say. Let me just say our position, which is we let people spray whipped cream from a can, and we let go scoop out ice out of the ice machines. Scoop it out, to put out, even though we know that when you scoop it out, there's more ice being formed behind it, or at some point more ice being formed, we do let them do it. Yes?
Also, I happened to be at an event where they had spare ribs and sauce to sit on the left for Shabbos. And
Sit on or be put on?
to put on Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to, you don't even have something like Shabbos 101, so simple that I told the caterer, and I told the caterer that you can't do this, is not allowed.
Right. So our main section is going to be about cooking and warming food.
We're going to get to
coming
that.
in. That's when we turn the page. We'll come into that's the bulk of it. Even though we've been going on for some time with it, but that's the bulk of what we have to talk about. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I know the answer to this already, but this is for me personally.
Okay.
I think it should be addressed by the CSC. What happens if there's a dispute? I don't want to say dispute. If there's a difference of opinion between the mashgiach and his personal she does
practice.
practice,
And the
and the CRC on both sides, whether he's more machmer or the CRC is more machmer.
Yeah.
Now, the question before about that was where the mashgiach had to do something. He had to turn on a fire.
That's
That's a separate question. In this question, let's say I, in my house, would not use a peeler, and the CRC said that the word let it. Okay, so we're not asking the mashgiach to use the peeler. He just has to watch them and make sure they do it right. I mean, he could ask a shayla, but I don't think that he should feel bad about that. It's not like,
So that somebody keeps smoking his stroll, and we send him to do a run that smokes down. Does that mean
he's not...
that he's doing something wrong?
I don't think like that. I guess if the mashgiach had such a personal,
Agenda?
no, he felt so strongly about that it was wrong, then maybe he shouldn't do the event. It's hard. It's one thing to say to do it yourself, but they watch someone else do it.
Would you have posted him and say it's mutter?
We don't think that we're so far off range that we're not even, within reason. That's what we think. Okay.
No, it's just,
Okay.
Question there?
Yeah, all types of things. Carving watermelon baskets, which is seen on Shabbos, and I never thought it was a problem. Is that...
It is acceptable, yeah, because that carving is considered simple carving. They're not making sophisticated. They're just cutting, into diamonds or little balls like
They're
that.
cutting they're taking the watermelon out, they're scooping it out, and then they're just making it a whole...
A handle, and then maybe they're cutting a little bit of there's nothing very
design.
sophisticated to
Yeah,
that.
it doesn't look sophisticated.
When you make a
I could do it probably.
If you make a fancy shaping, that's what you're not allowed to do.
What if the parts were cut before Shabbos and it was put together, you wanted to put it together?
Put together the basket.
Made it very...
you made a swan, but it wasn't a one-piece swan.
Right.
I don't know. I don't believe it's a problem. But I don't know. Okay,
Can
tomorrow.
we make a fancy shape out of
Not tomorrow.
simpler shapes?
What do you mean by that?
That's what we were
That's
just
what we're
saying.
saying.
Give it an example.
You have a piece of gefilte fish, that's circle, and you cut off a triangle in the back, and you can make a fish out of it. And you turn it around, so now you have a triangle in the back with, I'm saying, the cob becomes the mouth.
He has a lot of little kids.
He was just at home.
That's
That's the only way you get to feed the fish,
So you're teaching...
And I gotta work it out here so I get my kid medicine, you know
You're
what
just
I'm
cutting
saying?
out a triangle from the piece of gefilte fish.
Probably okay.
I think that's true.
I think it's okay.
Wait a minute, what about fixing up a cake that got smashed or something?
Okay.
It's the intricate cake, and the flowers came off, and you tell your staff, it's to look presentable for the buffet.
Okay.
Is there an issue with fixing that up?
So you mean putting the pieces back together?
Putting pieces back together,
That's okay.
smearing frosting, whatever.
Those are all okay. Those are okay.
Smearing, or there might be,
You can't make the shapes
You can't pipe
into those shapes.
pipe more flowers.
Right. That's correct.
What about the smearing? Chappelle?
I think it's okay.
What was that doing?
Tell them. Tell them.
Ask about
Okay.
smearing.
Okay. Now, in serving the food, I had mentioned this already that we don't put out slotted spoons into, like, okay, things that have liquids in them, because they'll end up being burned.
This is important, this is a common, this number 28 is very common in catering.
Okay, we don't let them put out slotted spoons if there's going to be liquids and solids together. The example, like if there's
I don't know anymore.
a salad that has a watery dressing to it, okay?
I don't use sliders spoons at all.
If we have
It was too confusing for weight.
we have a dressing, a salad that has a watery dressing to it, then the slotted spoon, people using that spoon are separating the good from the bad, that they're allowed to, but they're using a tool that's meant for being butter. It's meant to separate. Okay, that it leaves the liquid behind and takes just the salad, so we wouldn't let them put that out. Okay, now, the next thing is that if you have a lemon, a slice of lemon, and you want to squeeze that into your tea, okay, there's a way that you can do it and a way that you can't. Okay, there is a way to do it, and our point here, I'll mention it in a second, but our point here is there is a way that people can use that properly, and therefore you can put out lemon wedges out with the assumption that they'll know how to use it. Okay? You don't have to. We don't have to put out a placard that says this is how you do it. That is to say, now for the detail of it, it happens to be you are not allowed to squeeze a lemon into a cup of tea directly, because that's turning a solid, the lemon is a solid, into a liquid. It's being squeezed into a liquid. If you want to do it properly, you would either just leave the lemon in, just dunk it right into the tea, or squeeze the lemon into a solid like the sugar. Okay, so it's going from a solid to a solid, and then put the sugar into your tea. Okay, now, there are people who are not familiar with that, who are not as familiar with those, that's of a very fine detail, but there is a way to use it properly, therefore we would let. As opposed to, I'm skipping a little bit, but as opposed to, if I put out a packet of NutraSweet, okay, and it's got a zillion little words on it, okay, it's almost impossible to open that package up without ripping words. So we wouldn't let someone do that because we're setting up the guest to do the wrong thing. There isn't any way for them to get open that pack of tea or coffee with a million words on it without ripping words. So we wouldn't let them do that. We would let you put out the lemons because there's ways to use it without being Machal Shabbos.
Would you allow, I don't know if it ever came up, would you allow the tops to be cut off of the package?
Yes. So in some places where they must have little packets, they don't want to put out a cans of it. So Rabbi Eisenbach will tell you how long they spend. This is
Okay, explain
Rabbi,
what the lemon is.
okay. Rabbi Eisenbach will explain to you how long they spend cutting open sugar packets for someone who specifically had to have their sugar packets, individual packets. They cut it open before Shabbos. If that's what, as they say, if that's what floats your boat. If you need to have it in little packets and you want the Mashiach to spend an hour cutting them open.
No, what's Mashiach? They hired a fellow from early in the morning, a whole Friday, one guy with the scissors in the East Tower of the Hyatt, snipping, and they're filling their thing. I said, this is the sugar. Why don't you just use horrible? No, it's got to look nice on the table. Just snipping the whole day.
So they had the packets, but they were already cut open.
Everything was cut off for the whole shop.
And then they had to throw away.
3,000 people.
Yes, right.
I'm not quite sure who is making up these rules here, but I would say if you walk down the street and find whether they be fruit, I'm not talking about the cola.
Your average Joe, okay.
I'm talking about the
Average Joe.
Let's even take a shoulder for lack of better words. That doesn't have a mechitza, but now they see a truck outside from the caterer that says Danziger, Kosher, or anyone else. I'm going to say, did you think they drove here today? They'll say no. But if I ask that person, how do you use a lemon wedge at Shabbos? They'll say you squeeze it into the...
Yeah.
So my point is that you're so master of something such as a truck, which I think that the Snabi, and for sure the front person isn't going to think they drove there at Shabbos.
It's a very fair question. We asked almost exactly the same question. Okay? What you're asking is a judgment. Which things should we be concerned and which ones not? That kind of judgment went to Rabbi Schwartz. We said, Rabbi Schwartz, do you think that most people know how to squeeze lemons? Do you think that we're setting them up to make a mistake? And he thought not. Now, you can bring it back up to him. I'm not...
We can write it again.
We can tell you said it.
Well, one of his things was, he says, he himself does, and I do, he says, I take my lemon and I put it into my tea. And he says, many people take their lemons and put it into their tea.
We can go back to him. We raised that exact point. We said, are we not setting people? There are lots of people who don't know that.
It's not a problem with the fish.
Someone asked if we could repeat the thing. A person is not allowed to take it's called mefarek, to take a solid and take something, to squeeze something out of it. Okay, you're not allowed to squeeze juice on Shabbos. So, if I take an orange and I squeeze the orange and make juice, I've separated the liquid from the solid. That's called mefarek. You're not allowed to do that. Okay. Now, the issue there is because I took the solid and I took the liquid out of the solid. But if I take the solid and turn it into another solid, now we all know that it was a drop in between, right? It squeezed from the lemon and dripped into the sugar. There was a liquid in between. We ignore that. You're allowed to squeeze it from a solid into another solid. That's mutter. You're not allowed to go from a solid into a liquid. Okay? So now, what he is saying is that this is a pretty fine detail. Not everybody who would stop in shul tonight is going to know that if you want to squeeze lemon, do it this way, not that way. Right? Lots of people will not know that. It's a fine detail. So, and we asked that question. It was a judgment. And from the look on people's faces here, maybe we should go back to Rabbi Schwartz and say to him that maybe other people do it differently. Okay.
Let me ask that way on the table, because you do the catering, you're involved with catering and everything. What would be, there are people that do want lemon for their tea. You can't deny that. Should there be a sign on, what would be an idea to make...
A bottle of real lemon makes it very, very simple.
You could have lemon juice instead of lemons?
Yes. Why not make it a policy?
Again, this is not our...
No,
we asked the rub. This was his fault.
I'm just saying.
Or just how many people might use lemon but don't use sweetener?
Right?
So they don't have that vehicle to use to get the lemon.
That's true. That's what you see. Maybe they're putting in lemon and they don't even have
Give lemon juice instead of, see, when it comes with the fish, that fish is made to squeeze straight onto the fish.
That's fine.
That's not a problem. So maybe, again, we'll bring this to, you have it down about lemon.
Bring the truck back to
I want you to know, we've been accused that the car's been moved, the mashgiach had the key to the truck, and they said the truck moved at 3 in the morning. The mashgiach had the key!
No, but I mean, the way you wrote it.
All my trucks.
There we go.
We've been accused. I'm telling you, we have been accused. But with the lemons,
The truck, run over the lemons with the truck and...
Yes, go.
There's quite a difference between tequilas and how they treat, to make the tea, whether tea bags are...
we're gonna get to that too.
We're coming to that. That's in the cooking section. We're coming to that. Okay. Let's wind down over here. There's a question whether you're allowed to cut words on a cake. Okay, if you have words written, happy birthday, mom. If you're allowed to cut those words on a cake, we recommend to people that they put it onto a piece of plastic. Okay, they put like this, something thin, something small, they put it onto there, and that way they could just lift it off and cut the cake afterwards. We do not allow cans to be opened on Shabbos.
Well, this is very important.
Okay.
Because I don't want arguments, fights.
Fine. B, which is that if they forgot to put the words onto the plastic, okay, by mistake it was left on, because there's a question whether you are or not allowed to cut those words, a guy would be allowed to cut them. Okay? We would say, instead of the birthday girl cutting the cake, we would take it back to the kitchen and have the guy cut the cake. Okay? We don't open cans on Shabbos. Cans have to be opened from before Shabbos. Bottles, we would allow the non-Jewish staff to open bottles on Shabbos.
Cans of pop, if the crew, for example, here's a good question. What happens if they bring olives in a can and they forgot to open that can on Shabbos? It's in the kitchen. It would not be here. Would we permit the non-Jew to open that can of olives?
Ask him.
Write it down.
No idea. Okay.
We're talking about when you have a bar. Okay, listen, we're talking about when you have a bar. This is, just thought of this question.
Oh, can you open up the can?
Right, can you have the person open it?
And my,
Just destroy the can.
They come in cash.
I won't tell you what I think. We will give you a better answer tomorrow.
Glass.
Okay.
Green olives coming in Israel.
Black olives.
Green olives coming in week.
Okay, guys. Okay. We're ready for... We're ready. Before we move on to cooking, does anyone have any more questions before we get on to the...
I didn't get the answer on the can.
The answer is we'll tell you tomorrow.
Elbow fence.
Okay. Before we move on, any more questions before we get to the cooking and warming food?
Number 34.
30.
Yeah.
30 what?
34.
31.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, you could use twisties, open and close them, and you can pin things onto the table, like tablecloths and things like that.
Your skirts.
Okay, yes.
You could scalp the tablecloths.
Okay. Okay, now for, it struck me, before we start the warming, that the main question, in my mind, the main, issue that if Rabbi Eisenbach had to give someone a short course in being a mashgiach for Shabbos, Rabbi Eisenbach would say the following. This is Rabbi Eisenbach's, this is the short course. You can only warm up food in the following 3 ways. And he would tell them the 3 ways of warming food on Shabbos, because that's really super important in how you have to do that. And it struck me that it's not the list, but the second to last thing in this whole Megillah over here. Okay, so, but
Save the best for last.
yeah, but the warming and heating food is, I would think, is from the most critical, or it comes up most in dealing on Shabbos. So we're going to go through the different issues that there are.
Depending on the kid.
And before we start, because of the complications of this, it's worthwhile, it's always worthwhile to do this, but especially for Shabbos, for the mashgiach to look at the menu before Shabbos. And look at the menu and say, do all these things on the menu, can I pull that off? Is it possible to serve that food at this meal? Someone mentioned a second ago, which was our example. They want to serve gravy on Shabbos morning. Okay? They want to serve rare meat on Shabbos morning. You can't serve meat that's cooked rare on Shabbos morning. It's not going to happen. Okay? So it's not, you can't pull it off. So if you look at the menu, you say, wait a second, that thing, either I can't do it, or just tell me how are we going to do that. That is going to be more difficult.
The CRC needs to interface with the caterer to say this is an acceptable menu item and not. Because
Well, that's why we have some of our caterers here, so we're all on the same page. Not everyone's able to
they
make
need
it.
to in the future, because this particular caterer.
I got it.
So when a caterer is new at doing Shabbos events, they need education to understand what they can and can't do. With time, they get to learn these things. They don't make mistakes.
What can't be.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct. Okay.
I mean, everything can be really on a menu, but you got to work it out.
It's worth, even with an experienced caterer, it's worth it because mistakes slip by. And the lady said, oh, I must have gravy on my meat on Shabbos morning, and someone wrote it down. If they weren't thinking, it got onto the menu. Okay.
And you
Now,
mentioned cheesecake.
there are, we're going to divide, we're going to divide, we're going to divide this section, the questions of heating and warming food on Shabbos. It involves potentially 5 things that could go wrong, 5 isurim that could happen, and we're going to divide our talk into those 5 sections, okay? Those 5 things are havara. Havara means you're not allowed to make a fire on Shabbos. Bishul means you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. Those 2 that I just mentioned are asur mid'oraisa. You're not allowed to cook, you're not allowed to make a fire. Each of these I'm going to explain in more detail in a second, okay? And then there are 3 things that are asur midrabanan, and they are shehiyah. You're not allowed to leave, on certain circumstances, you can't leave food on a fire, even from before Shabbos. On a fire, we'll talk about the details in a second. Hatmana means you're not allowed to insulate foods under circumstances for Shabbos. You're not allowed to insulate them to keep them warm. And the last is chazara. You're not allowed to put food onto a fire or return it to a fire on Shabbos. It can't be put on, it's called lechatchila. You're not allowed to put it on at first. It has to have been on from before Shabbos. And we'll talk about these details as we go on. Okay? So the first 2 are asur mid'oraisa. The last 3 are asur midrabanan. And the reason why they're asur is for 2 reasons. One is shem yechata. We're concerned that if a person is fiddling with their food on Shabbos, they may come to raise the flame, lower the flame. They might play around with it because the food is not cooking right. So we have restrictions to keep the person from making a mistake and adjusting the temperature. And the other one is nira kimavashal, mersi kimavashal. A person watching this from the outside will think that that he's cooking. He took a pan of chicken, he took a pan out and stuck it into the oven. It looks like he's cooking. So some of these things are asur because it gives a misconception that you're allowed to cook things on Shabbos when in fact you're not. So certain things are asur because of it. Okay? Let's go. Now we're going to go through them. The first one is havara, creating a fire. Any type of heat or any fires, electric, steam, all those things, if to turn them on, turn them higher, is an issur of havara, creating a fire. The same, a related issur is to make them lower. Okay, so we can't raise temperatures or lower temperatures, and many things that have to do with electricity, slicers and lights and things like that, may not technically be havara, but they're within that category. Some of them may be only drabanan, but they're within what we would consider havara of creating a fire on Shabbos. Because to avoid these kind of isurim of havara, anything that's going to require adjustments of fire, you can't do on Shabbos. You can't adjust those flames, and knobs and the way you adjust it, the control panels need to be covered up from before Shabbos. Okay? There are those who don't allow this, but we don't consider it. We allow the opening of a refrigerator or an oven door on Shabbos, except, as I mentioned, about a convection oven. But as a rule, even though turning on an oven may make the flame go on, or if you open the refrigerator, the motor may move. Rabbi Schwartz is not concerned about that. He says it's a groma, and you're allowed to.
Groma means
Even if it's open for a long time.
indirect, and you know,
A person is allowed to do it. Yes. Okay. Fine. So that's havara. Okay, havara, not too common. What our main thing is, you can't be adjusting flames, and knobs and things like that have to be covered. Okay. The next issue is bishul. Bishul means a person is not allowed to cook. Now, the term cook depends on whether you're talking about a solid food or a liquid food. That is to say, a potato and a cup of water, cooking for those things is different. For a solid food, cooking means taking it and making it from inedible to edible. Okay, from inedible to edible. A potato, if it's raw and I cook it, it's cooked. If it's already cooked, even if it's frozen, you can't do bishul to that. You may do other things you're not allowed to do to it, but bishul can't happen again once it was cooked. As opposed to a liquid, cooking for a liquid is to make it hotter than Yatzel Ledespoy. Yatzel Ledes is somewhere between 120 and 160. So if I have water out of the tap and I heat it up to 160 degrees, I put bishul to it. If I take that hot water and put it back into the fridge and it cools down, and I take it out again, it would be bishul to cook it a second time. That's not true for the potato. For the potato, once it was cooked, it's cooked. Okay, the piece of chicken is not, you can't cook it again. But the liquid, even if it's been cooked, it can be cooked a second time. Because cooking means crossing that line from below Yatzel Ledes to above. That's what's considered cooking for liquids. Okay? You have a question? You have a question? No? Okay, I thought you had a question. Okay. For these kind of things, stew, even cholent and gravy are considered liquids. But things like, someone asked about mashed potatoes, a little bit of liquid that's left on the side of a piece of meat, all those are considered solids. A piece of meat that has a drop of gravy, of congealed fat on it, that's considered a solid. Of mashed potatoes is considered a solid.
Well, cholent that is considered W. I mean, you've got certain cholents. Some make it a liquidy cholent, and some make it
It's a liquid.
pasty cholent. We'll have to take samples on it and eat it.
That's right.
What about kugel?
Okay, kugel is solid. Kugel is solid. Liquids are things that are really pourable, like gravy and soup and things like that. Kugel is a solid. Yes.
Let's say you have try when you start out with a chicken. And it's in the oven for a while, and you want to remove it from a hot oven and put it on top of the blood.
Okay,
And by that time, you know there's juice in the chicken, not just a little.
Oh, that's the juice from the chicken.
Yes.
Okay, so he's saying if a lot of it poured out. Okay, that's it.
A half inch in the pan or an inch in the pan.
Okay, so that would be considered a liquid, but that's really not such a common occurrence. We'll talk about it more a little later. It's not such a...
work with that one particular place.
Yes.
That's how it happens.
Okay, yes.
So then you got to prepare...
Like with barbecue sauce or something?
That's a solid.
So still a solid.
I believe. We'll check on that, but I'm pretty sure it is.
He's checking it out. Last two is next Friday.
Power goes out in your stock pot.
Yes.
You got a cholent in there. It's Shabbos morning. It's hot. It's burning hot. And there's a blech that's on.
Okay, so now we'll actually talk about that in a minute.
That's not what you later.
Wait a second. Bishul, remember for a liquid, bishul for liquid means making it from below Yatzel Ledes to above. So this is already over Yatzel Ledes. It's not bishul. It's not bishul to do it. It might be chazara. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's not bishul because it is already over Yatzel Ledes. If it got cold, then it would be a question of bishul. Okay, but it's not a question. If that's not bishul, it's still hot. You're okay. 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 In order to avoid bishul, this rule is all food coming into the event has to be completely cooked before Shabbos. If the food is all fully cooked, we have the kugel is all the way done, then we can't run into questions of bishul. If the kugel was not fully cooked, we would potentially have problems with bishul, so we wouldn't use that kugel. Don't bring a kugel that needs to be, finished up. It needs to be fully
Edible. It's got to be edible.
It needs to be fully cooked.
According to,
According to what?
edible according to whom?
What do you mean edible?
No, he wants a how cooked. Fully cooked. Yeah, all you cook is not fully
Fully
cooked.
cooked.
What? It's not cooked?
What's considered fully cooked?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Some people like things are burnt, and other people like it, not quite as overdone.
Okay, I'm not sure.
What the egg in it is raw, I would assume.
But what did you say?
The egg in the kugel, whatever, is
I can eat
cooked where
it.
it's
Just
not
to be
raw
eating it.
anymore.
That's correct.
Some places,
You ever bring, I'm saying,
Fully cooked and edible with two different...
some places, the way they
Right.
cook kugels is they stick them in the oven right for Shabbos and let them cook all night.
Okay, the question here we're talking about is bishul on Shabbos. Are you saying they put it in raw before Shabbos? Okay, as of...
seen that by kids?
Okay.
You do?
Okay. If someone does that, we should talk about that separately. It actually runs into the next section. Not a question of bishul, it's a question of shehir. But we'll talk about that separately, okay? As a rule, we discourage that. Okay? We would rather food is supposed to be fully cooked when Shabbos starts. It makes life simpler for everything. If someone has a special reason, if If there's a reason why dafka has to be not fully cooked, then do it separately. We'll talk to our Asma privately, and we'll deal with that. Okay. Again, what I'm saying is that I don't want to close the door completely on it. Okay, but it's to be done separately. Okay. Okay. We're going to go through some examples of where bishul could come up on Shabbos. You say, wait a second, if all the food is all cooked, where am I going to come to bishul? So we're going to go through some examples. Okay. And the first one you see here is coffee and tea. Okay. You have instant coffee. That coffee has already been cooked in the factory, or that's part of making an instant coffee. It's been cooked already. So there's nothing wrong with using instant coffee on Shabbos. You put it into a cup of hot water. You're not cooking that coffee. It's already been cooked. Can't cook it again. It's a salad, and it's already been cooked. And the same thing with the tea powder. Okay? But if I take coffee grinds, if I want to make freshly brewed coffee, I'm taking coffee that has not been cooked, and I'm cooking that on Shabbos. That would be bishul. Okay? So we don't use, obviously we don't, I assume you all know, we don't make fresh coffee on Shabbos. Okay? We don't make fresh, yes?
What if the Goyim would make it and they would join 5 or 10 cups? Could we use the rest of it?
No, we would not. No, we would not use it. Okay, now, as for tea,
With coffee, there's concentrated.
liquid concentrated coffee,
The only way to make coffee concentrate is to cook it.
okay. Now, if we have a liquid coffee, it's a liquid, so once it cools down, when you heat it up again, that's considered cooking again. Okay, now, so that would be permitted, now we're going to get into a technicality, that would be permitted in a cliché. If you put the hot water in first, you could pour that liquid into there. Okay, that's a technicality.
Which we'll get to in a second.
We're not really good. I didn't have that case in here. It'll be in next time. But a liquid, once it's cooled down, it's not cooked anymore. So now we say it could be cooked the second time. It would only be mutter in a cliché.
You pour the water in first,
And then you put the liquid. Okay, now, for tea powder, you can use tea powder. Excuse me. And another way to serve tea on Shabbos is what we call tea essence, which is to say you steep some tea bags in water before Shabbos, in a little bit of water. You make basically a tea concentrate, like you had mentioned. You could put that into a cliché.
You can't let the caterer put out tea bags.
Hold on.
Come in.
Number C.
Okay, and number C is we allow tea bags only if they're done in a very specific way. Okay, which is tea bags. The typical way you use a tea bag is you take some hot water out of the urn and you put the tea bag into it. Okay, so what we have for this, it's going to get a drop technical, which is the pot that the water cooks in is called the kli rishon. It's the first pot.
Right.
Okay, we call it a kli rishon, the first pot. When you take the water out of there and you put it into some other container, pitcher, a cup, that's called a kli sheni, a second cup. We do not put tea bags into a kli sheni. Okay? If the water goes from there into a third container, that's called a kli shlishi, that you would be allowed to. So, if the cup is a kli shlishi. So, let me just finish. So, if the waiters fill up pitchers with hot water, okay, and they bring it to the people's cups at the table, so those people are getting the water in a kli shlishi, then we could put out tea bags on the table. If the people are taking their own, let's say there's an urn sitting there with hot water, the people are going to put it into a kli sheni, then we would not allow tea bags. Okay, so we can so we can allow tea bags, but you have to think about what you're doing. Okay, Rabbi Eisenach and I were just in a place where they had both setups. There was one part of the place where they were going to be serving out of pitchers, in which case there we can have tea bags. There was another part where the urn was just sitting up there like a tea room, and you just take your own. In that case, there we would not let the tea bags. Okay, so you have to think about that. Okay.
It's like the lemon rule.
I was about to say.
The person puts the tea bag in the cup and then pours from the kli sheni into the kli shlishi with the bag in it. That we don't care.
No, so what we do is we won't put out tea bags unless they only get their water in a kli shlishi. They might put it in first. I got
This
it.
is the kli shlishi.
Very interesting.
So
That's what I was saying. Very interesting. I was about to ask that.
Mr. Goldstein over there.
Take your tea bag out.
He puts his tea bag in there, then he takes and he pours the water into it. That you're not allowed to do. That's like the lemon.
Okay, I believe. I spoke to Rabbi Schwartz about tea bags. I believe he would not be concerned about that. Okay, he wouldn't tell you to do that. I'm not saying he would tell you to do that. But if somebody, I don't think he would tell you to do that in your house. But he wouldn't say, don't put out tea bags because someone might do that. I think he would not be that concerned. The lemon wedges, we have what to talk about. This one, I don't think. We'll ask him again. I don't think that he...
The staff, the serving staff needs to be trained about this.
Yeah, right.
Serving staff isn't going to know. You can't tell a guest, take your tea bag out of your cup. No. And you cannot do that. You can't.
I don't think what it's...
About your shirt cap.
I,
You got it. You got it.
okay.
Tea bags.
Yeah, Mrs. Evans.
But technicality, why isn't the tea bags a,
Mrs. Evans, the problem, I'll tell her to tell
A
me.
tea bag is a strainer?
why isn't it?
I don't remember the answer to that. Last part talk about that. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I don't know. What? I don't know the answer to that question. David says you should take it out of this one. Okay. I don't know. Okay. Next. Move on. Okay, the hot water urns.
Number 48.
48. Hot water urns. Okay, if hot water urns. Okay, if the hot water urns got I don't know, 50 cups of water into it, that water's been cooked from before Shabbos, and we could use it on Shabbos. What happens, but as the water drains out of the urn. Okay, so the standard thing to do would be to refill it. Okay, we obviously cannot refill them on Shabbos. There are also ones that automatically refill. That they're connected to a water connection. Every time you take out a cup, a new cup goes in. That is also not allowed. So that has to be disconnected before Shabbos. That automatic refill has to be disconnected. Okay?
Covered.
Okay. Yes.
That's only in the center.
So in the 3 compartments, it would be the center one. In one like this, there's some that are just a single compartment, just connected to a pipe. That has to be closed off. That valve that lets in the cold water. Okay, now.
Is there an automatic shut off if there's no water in there, or will it have a fire?
That's a good question. You have to ask the engineers. That's a good question. Whether there's an automatic to prevent the...
problem many years ago. That's why on Shabbos morning we came to that synagogue and the ceiling came down because it was boiling on Shabbos.
Okay, that's a fair point. Okay, that's something to check on. Okay, okay. Now, what happened was, what happened is they ran out of water, and eventually just okay. Now, some of the urns have what they call a level indicator, which is a thin pipe that's vertical pipe right outside the urn. Okay, and that work, it shows you how many cups you have left in your urn. Now, what happens is like this: when you fill up your urn, the water fills up in the main urn and in this level indicator, and the water comes to a boil, or to whatever temperature, 180 degrees. Whatever comes to, it's hot, it's cold. What happens is that water that's in the level indicator may not come to the same temperature as the water inside. It's outside, it's separated. It may not get to be hot. It may not get to be. It may not come to be hot enough. That water that's on the outside. So what happens? It's not bittul. What's going to happen is when you draw. No, it's water up as tall as the urn is. So let's say there's a couple water in that thing equal to the amount of water inside. So when you draw water out of the urn, some of that water from the indicator will mix with the main water that's inside. It'll mix in your cup and will cook that water. Okay? So to avoid that water, now that will end up being bishul on Shabbos. So to avoid that problem, there's a very simple way to avoid that problem, which is after the urn comes to a boil, okay, however long it takes for the water to come to a boil, on Erev Shabbos, if you let out a cup of water, okay, what will happen is, you can watch it, you'll see this, I can't explain you the physics. But what happens is that the water from that indicator comes out first. Okay? In the first cup of water, you get a lot of the water from the indicator and less water from the main part of the urn. So what you're essentially doing is you're flushing out that uncooked water and refilling it with cooked water. Okay? It'll then refill right back from the urn. That will be cooked water. So you're allowed to do that on Shabbos.
So before Shabbos, the first cup.
The first cup. Should not be. That's correct. So before Shabbos, after the water's come to a boil, you'll let out a cup of water out of the urn. Let a cup of water out of the urn, and then you're okay.
Something I never even thought of. Right?
Grab that, you get a list, and you're all right.
Now, in some urn, I'm not saying it's not always going to come to Yad. Some yes and some not. It depends on how it's set up, how much heat transfers into this pipe, which is really separated from the rest of the urn.
Right.
Okay, now, if you want to spice food on Shabbos. Okay. With the way we're at 50. If anyone's following along.
Page 7.
Okay. You spice food on Shabbos. Okay. The way salt is processed, the Shulchan Aruch talks about salt. We process salt a little bit differently than the way they did. The way we process salt is it's cooked enough that if you want to put it into food which is off the fire, you're allowed to. Okay, you can't put salt onto the fire, but if you have food that's off the fire, you can add salt on Shabbos. And the same would be for other liquid sauces like ketchup. If you want to put it into food, it's already been cooked in the factory. You can't put it onto the fire, but you can put it into food that's off the fire.
Even a cleaver shot off the fire?
Even
Cleavage.
I don't remember. It's a good question. I don't remember. Okay.
What about a liquid soy sauce?
I'm talking about even a liquid. Wait a second. Soy sauce, I'm not going to answer you. Rather than answer off the spot. Good question. Answer tomorrow.
Are we going to have a refresher?
Yeah.
Tomorrow means, Rashi says, Yesh Mocha Shahula Achazman. Sometimes tomorrow means in a long time from now. Tomorrow, that's what I'm saying.
But we'll have a...
Mañana, it's okay, anyway, now, spices are not cooked at all. Okay, spices are not cooked at all in the factories, and therefore, you can put spices only into a klisheni. Here it says it, only into a klisheni, meaning not the pot that the food was originally cooked in, and not onto something that's hot and a solid, what we call a davar gush. Okay, onto chal. Okay, so spices we're more careful about than the salt is, and we're going to check this out. I think the first one you left. We'll check it out. Okay.
Put it out the way.
Now, what is it? The solid food it's talking about? Is it spices or food that is being
food that's being the hot food.
So it has to be put into a liquid?
It cannot be in cliche, right?
Yeah.
No, but the spice can only be added to a liquid, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Because the salad
Because
is...
the spice was never cooked.
No, but what's the reason it's only on the liquid, not a salad? The salad is still a clean...
The reason, because salads maintain the heat. They hold on to the heat better than liquids. Okay, off to soup. Okay, if we have a ladle to dish out the soup, and that ladle was washed, that ladle will have water on it that has never been cooked beforehand, so we wouldn't put that ladle into the soup. Okay, if we would dry it off first. If the ladle has been used to scoop out a bowl of soup already, so the ladle, and as long as the ladle is still hot, you can keep putting it back in. Okay, if the ladle cools off, then you have to dry it off again. But as long as the ladle stays hot, you can keep on dunking it back in and taking more soup.
One thing to be careful is if the ladle stays in the pot, it's a clean ratio.
Okay.
Just bring it up.
Okay, that's true.
54. That applies to 54.
It actually does not. There's a special exception in 54 that does not apply. I'll explain to you. It does
Wait
not.
to 54. Wait to 54.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, 53. Some things that have been cooked before, like a knedel or noodles, okay, they've been cooked already beforehand. They can be put into. They can't be put into the pot that's on the fire, but they can be put into people's bowls, into a klisheni. You can put those things in. They were already cooked.
Already hot.
Once it's what?
What if they're hot?
What if what's hot?
The noodles or the knedel, what if they come out of whatever hot?
Okay, then what's your question?
Is it the same row or different?
You cannot put it onto the fire. You can't put it onto the fire.
No,
It's a chazar.
I'm sure you could do it.
But you could even put it cold into people's soup if you want to. Once it's off the fire, you could put it into people's bowls.
Okay, so you're serving a soup. You take something cold, you put it in a bowl. Can you put the hot soup on top of it?
Say that again.
You're serving a
You have the
soup.
knedel first in the bowl,
You have-
and then you take
yeah.
the hot soup and put it
Put
into
it
the...
on the bowl. You're putting hot onto cold. If it's not hot. I'm not asking if it's
Like a
hot.
matzo ball.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. It's already been cooked.
Cooked already.
It's already been cooked.
It's already cooked.
It's already cooked. But you're not allowed to put it onto the fire. But
No,
anything
that's not
that's off the fire, you're allowed to do it. Yes, it's already been cooked. It can't be cooked again.
How usually you first put the matzo ball and then the soup, or what came first?
We put it in a tureen, so it
Oh,
doesn't matter.
right.
Okay.
According to what you have written here,
Yes.
it looks like you could put the cold knedel... Wait. It looks like you put the cold knedel into the cleavation, according to the way this is written. Is that correct?
I believe it's correct.
Okay, fine.
It's already been cooked.
And it's off the fire.
Well, it's off the fire, that's why.
What about it?
Over from the soup bowl, that's how you put you like soup and matzo ball.
Well, I know why you do it.
Never mess.
That's why we do it all hot.
And then pour the hot soup over it.
If it's off the fire, you'd be allowed to, I think you're allowed to do that.
We take it all off
There's
at the same time.
Okay,
Yeah, once it's on.
okay, now croutons.
I didn't put it back on, just saying to serve it.
Croutons, there's two types of croutons. That's what 54, there's two kinds of croutons.
For you.
Croutons, there are the fried croutons, at least in my house, the little yellow ones,
Yeah,
okay?
the yellow
The
ones,
little, those are deep fried, so they've been cooked already. And those, since they've been cooked, you can put them into soup, and cooking them again is you can't cook them again. They've already been cooked, okay? Baked croutons, which is to say they're really sliced up pieces of bread, those have been baked.
Yeah.
They have not been cooked. Okay, they have not been cooked. So there we have a complicated thing, but the rule is what says here, which is you can't put it into the pot that was on the fire.
We put in the bowl.
You can't even put it into something that if you drew it out of there into a second pot. But if you use the ladle to scoop it into something else, then you would be allowed to. Okay, because now this is I might complicate. This might be a little complicated. Usually a ladle doesn't make something. Usually a ladle doesn't count as a cliché. Okay? The pot that's on the fire is the cleavation. Usually the ladle transferring it doesn't change the status. Usually we say that a ladle still has the status of a cleavation. For this din, we say that it does have the status. Okay, it's a special cool over here. Usually we would not say that. Usually we'd say a ladle is considered the same status as the pot, but in this case we don't. I hope I'm
That's only if-
loose
that's
with
only-
people.
that's
That's
only-
only for a baked crouton.
It's only if the ladle doesn't get hot, it's
Maybe
left
have
in
the
the,
soup and
I
you-
think.
I don't think so.
I mean,
Put
that's,
some
I-
in.
I-
There's not a problem.
Taylor?
Not a
Okay.
problem.
So right there.
Or you put a pot of soup on the buffet and you put some
Croutons.
Either don't put croutons off the fire, then you defeat the purpose of the crouton.
Because they want to eat it right before they eat the soup.
Right, because otherwise it gets soggy.
We want the crouton crunchy.
Are they allowed to leave the ladle in the top? That, or that has to be left out?
Better it will be left in.
Otherwise,
Saying it
no,
doesn't change the status, I don't know why it would matter.
I
Better left.
think that it's okay, but he already wrote it down.
I think better left in because otherwise it cools off too fast and we're going to have to
no, then
dry it.
There's only like,
That's no official
Okay, guys, we will.
Okay, back to 57,
No, we're 55. Okay.
55.
Okay, we
You want to get out of here?
Was up all night.
okay. You can't heat up a gravy.
Delivered.
You can't heat up gravy. Can't heat up gravy on Shabbos. It's a liquid, and if it's been cold, you can't heat it up on Shabbos. The only way to use gravy on Shabbos morning is to leave it in from before Shabbos. You put it into your oven or your hot box. You leave it in there from before Shabbos, and then you could use it. If you want to take gravy out of the fridge and just pour it onto the food, and the gravy's of course been cooked already, that you can do. You can pour it onto the food. Just remember that once you put it onto the food, you can't take that food and make the food hot. Okay, you can't. All the things we're going to see about how to heat up food is only for dry food. And we're going to see later about how to warm up a cookle on Shabbos morning. If you took the chicken and poured gravy, the meat, poured gravy on top of it, now you can't heat up that meat. Now it's wet meat, and you can't do that. Okay. Now, so we've now covered Habara and Bishul, the two Isurim Deraisa. We're up to Shehiyah. Okay, Shehiyah means that Chachamim said you can't leave food on the fire before Shabbos unless one of two conditions. Either there has to be some kind of a blech, okay, there has to be some kind of covering on the fire, and some hold you should even cover the knobs also. That's part of covering of the fire is to cover the knobs as well. And the other way to do Shehiyah is if the food is cooked. Okay, if the food is cooked, some hold a third cooked and some hold fully cooked, but if the food is cooked, then there's also no problem of Shehiyah. Okay, so most people are doing both, and that's what we want people to do is to have both. All fires that are out on the stovetop are covered with a blech. Then we put a blech on, it's just food's going to be left on there, and we cover up the knobs, and the food is fully cooked. Okay, we're covering ourselves from the shehiyah to make sure we don't leave food on the fire that's not cooked. Okay, if I take a potato and it takes an hour to bake, and I baked it for 15 minutes, I can't leave that potato in the oven. Okay, that potato is not cooked, and there's no blech, I can't leave it in before Shabbos. Even though I'm not doing anything on Shabbos. I did it before Shabbos, I'm not allowed to do that. Okay?
So what's the policy then on the third or fully cooked? What's the CRC policy?
We require that it be fully cooked. If a person wants to do it less than fully cooked, we'll deal with that privately. Okay? The rule is, doesn't make a difference. Shehiyah, this is not a question of official. Shehiyah means you're not allowed to leave food on the fire unless it's either fully cooked or has a blech to it.
So a soup in a big pot for
Yes.
people.
Okay.
Heating up and boiling before Shabbos.
Right.
No, so-
Shabbos comes, do I have to put a block down now?
No, wait. So the soup, if the soup was never cooked, than it would be. The soup usually is fully cooked. You're just warming it up again before Shabbos. I mean, it's cooked for 2 hours yesterday. That's a cooked soup. That's okay. As far as it's a liquid. I'm sorry, it's a liquid. Yes, so it should be hot before Shabbos. I'm sorry. Yes, it should be hot before Shabbos.
Put a bluff
It has
up.
to be cooked.
The chunk has to be cooked before Shabbos. Yes.
So as long as I heat up the soup before Shabbos, it's not boiling. Shabbos comes, I do not need to remove the pot and put a black.
Halachically, you don't need to, but we want fires covered.
Our policy-wise if there's an open fire, it should be covered with a blech. Okay? Fire should be covered with a blech before Shabbos. I'm not saying the dinner you have to do.
Right.
You have a choice, either a blech or cooked. Okay? But we do both to cover ourselves, and the blech has advantages you'll see for later. Okay? But we do both to have it. We don't want open flames on there. It has problems for later.
Right, he's thinking, let's say in case he only does a Friday night dinner. He's not going to need a blech for the morning.
Right, okay.
And why not?
Do it anyhow.
But we cover the fires.
Okay, now, let me just say one more example. One more example is, this is Rabbi Eisenbach's example, which is, if you have, some people will throw sternos into a hot box before Shabbos to keep the hot box warm for the Friday night meal. So that's really a flame with food cooking in it. Okay, I mean, it's a portable flame, but it's a flame nonetheless. So either the sternos have to be turned off, put out before Shabbos, or you do something, put some kind of a pan on the bottom shelf or something to make some kind of your own sort of blech, so to speak. You're making a blech, an empty pan, as your, so to speak, blech. Okay, that's another example of it. Can I have also? Yeah, can I have also? Okay, yes. You got a question for me?
I might be a little bit premature in your Seder here.
Go ahead.
What's the CRC's policy about, let's say, putting a sholem with raw meat in it right before Shabbos? Well, it might be permitted in my home.
Again, that's it.
That actually is part of, right in this case, that has to do with shahir. We, as a policy, we would not allow it. If you have a special reason why, you talk to our Bezmach. Okay?
We'll work it out.
Really, if there's the policies have to be clear enough that people don't make mistakes.
Right.
If a person has a special reason why their kugel has to go in,
Let's say you put in a piece of raw meat. Let's say you put in a piece of raw meat, and you forgot to put a blech on it. You put it in the oven, or you put it without. What do you do then?
So the answer is, if
there's
someone
a
has
policy, and then there's outside of policy.
when you're doing something out of the policy is meant to make it clear and easy to be safe. If you want to do something more fine-tuned, Rabbi Eisenbach will give more specific directions. For this case, this is how I want you to do it, and then we can deal with it.
Or if you have a reason why you do it that way, then we can work it out.
Yes, good.
Since you said the word that this should be clear,
It should be clear. Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I would
What number?
write this in the positive instead of the negative.
Okay.
A person may leave food on the fire if you do the following.
Good point. Good point.
Second,
For
you
57.
got to take the machlokas.
57.
There's no machlokas. You said the CRC policy is there has to be
Yeah.
machlokas. Now, if you want to say, since there in parentheses, since there is a machlokas about a third cook, there may be times to see Rabbi Eisenbach, then put that in. But
Okay,
this
that's
is
a fair point.
unclear.
Fair
Got a very
point.
fair point there.
Fair point. Good.
Okay, we'll take care of it.
Yes, go ahead.
He's right.
In a press card, who could cook in a hot box, or when sent put it out into the warming? You need a bless there for Shabbos?
In a hot box?
Yes.
Okay, a hot box that you put sternos into it, or you just
You put
plugged it in?
on the bottom.
A Shabbos oven?
No, just a hot box.
Right, Chico.
And through yes, you should cover those sternos. Either blow them out before Shabbos, or put some kind of a blech sort of covering on them before
But
Shabbos.
an electric one, you don't need that.
That's good. Well, I'm going to take. The din is that if you put in raw food, yeah, you need a blech.
No.
But for us, we're not going to require a blech. No, that's good. The food is going to be fully cooked. But I'm saying that would be an example. If someone came with an exception that I want to put in my stuff that's not fully cooked, okay, I want to
Sit over
put into a hot box. We say, well, you can't. There's no blech in that hot box. No, you can't do it. So that's the rule has to be simple and straightforward. When the person has his exception, we'll have to judge that appropriately. Okay. Fine. Next, our next issue is hatmana. What is hatmana? A person is not allowed to
Page 8.
wrap up or insulate food on Shabbos. Now, there's two parts to hatmana. One is before Shabbos, I'm allowed to wrap up food and maintain its heat, but I'm not allowed to wrap up food in a way that makes it hotter. Okay? What am I talking about? How do I wrap up food that makes it hotter? So, for example, if I wrap up food and then I put it onto the fire, okay? So the net effect is between the fire and my wrapping, the food is going to be hotter. So even before Shabbos, I'm not allowed to do that. On Shabbos, I'm not allowed to do wrapping that either makes it hotter or even that keeps its temperature. So if I take food out of the oven and I stick it into a pizza bag, okay, on Shabbos, That's hatmana. I'm not. It's there to hold in its heat. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm wrapping something up, wrapping a towel or a pizza bag or something around it to keep its heat. I'm not allowed to do that on Shabbos.
What about aluminum foil?
I'm going to get that in 1 second. If I wanted to use the pizza box before Shabbos, then I could. Pizza bag. I pulled the pans out, wrapped them up in something before Shabbos. I can because that's keeping the temperature. Before Shabbos, I can do things that keep the temperature. I can't do things that increase the temperature. On Shabbos, I can't do either of those. I can't maintain the temperature or increase it. So on Shabbos, I'm even more restricted in what I can do. I can't wrap things up. Okay. So we judge whether a person is doing hatmana. This is yes.
Question. If you have food on the bless and you take it out of the bless and you want to put in a camper on Shabbos.
Into a what?
Camper.
Right here. Right here.
What? A box. Yeah, okay. Yes.
So you don't put it direct. You got to put it in another pan and then you can put it in the.
Okay, I'm going to get that example in a second. Okay. Okay. Now, whether something is judged as being hatmana or not, are you trying to insulate? Very much depends on your intention and what you're doing. Okay, and what I mean is as follows. If I take kishka and I wrap it in foil, and then I stick it into the food before Shabbos, why am I wrapping the kishka in foil? If I'm wrapping it because I want it to be hotter, that's hatmana. I'm wrapping it up, putting it over the fire, it's getting hotter. But that's not why I'm wrapping up my kishka. I'm wrapping up the kishka because I want it to stay as one solid piece and not break apart and fall into the chunk. So I'm not wrapping it to make it hotter. I'm wrapping it to hold its shape. That's okay. I have a pan of food and I put a piece of foil on top of it. I'm putting foil onto it because I don't want something to drip onto it or for it to spill. That's okay. If I put on 5 pieces of foil because I want it to be hotter, I think that one is not going to keep it hot enough, that's hatmana. So it depends on what I'm trying to do, what's going on in this situation. What am I trying to do? Okay, what do I have in mind when I'm wrapping up my food? If I put a towel around an urn, I'm not doing that to stop it from bird droppings. Okay, I'm doing that because I want to keep it hotter. So that's hatmana. Okay, I'm doing it because I want my urn to stay hotter. I wrap it up in towels. That's hatmana.
Hotter means that it doesn't lose its heat. Hotter doesn't mean...
It depends how you wrapped it.
It depends, right? If you heat something, if you do hatmana and it's on a heat source, that's considered it increases the heat. It makes, between the heat source and the wrapping, that's considered it increases the heat. The urn is plugged in. It's getting hotter. It has a coil on it or something. That's considered to hatmana that adds heat, called moist pebble, makes it even hotter. Okay, now, there are 2 exceptions to the rules of hatmana. Firstly is, it's only hatmana if the insulation touches the food or touches the pan. Okay, so if I take the pan, someone mentioned, if I take a pan of food and I stick it into one of these boxes, it's not hatmana because the insulation is the walls. They're not touching my pan. I'm sticking the pan into the thing and it's
on a shelf.
Onto a shelf, and the walls are not touching the pan. That's not hatmana. Okay. Surprise?
Well, the walls are touching the pan because...
Well, that's right, because it's got...
It's part of the curve.
Okay.
Not all
Right, but it's not on all sides. On the little the little edges it's being touched, but the rest of it is exposed.
Oh.
I guess if I filled up the whole box, if I filled up that whole box with pans, then it would be have hatmana, because then the whole 10 pans were stuck into it. I've filled up the whole thing. I have now wrapped up. I've insulated the whole thing. Okay, now.
Because it's not a ton order, then that's why the airspace doesn't count as the thing.
Even in the tanner, it would be the same thing. The reason why you're allowed to put food into an oven for before Shabbos is because the walls are not touching the pans. Okay, it's not hatmana because it's only hatmana if the wrapping, the towel, or the something is in contact with the pan or the food.
But there's not a problem because of the airspace around it?
The airspace is what makes it not hatmana. That separates between the matman, the insulation, and the food, and that's what makes it mutter. Now,
in other words, if you had a commercial oven, which usually has shelves above it, you got things on there. If you built a tent, aluminum foil down from the shelves to the front and on the sides, then that's fine.
If you built an aluminum foil, then it would be in contact with the pots, with the pans.
No, it would not be.
Okay.
As long as the aluminum foil is not touching the pots, in other words, if you have shelves on the oven.
If there's space in between them? You mean if there's 10 shelves and you put only in the middle 5?
No. Excuse me.
not oven, stovetop.
Stovetop,
There are
okay.
shelves above the stovetop,
Yes.
which in most commercial ovens they have, okay? And if you run the aluminum foil down from the top shelf down to the front of the stove, okay?
Leaving a
And on the
space.
sides,
Making it
okay, making a tent,
That's fine.
and there's no direct contact with the kaolin,
Yes.
then there's no problem?
That's fine. Yes, that's
We
fine.
make
That's not
it fat,
Hatmana.
or you have to keep it open.
You have to keep it open so you don't
It can't
put the
be
fires out.
sealed.
It'll
Correct.
blow the fires out.
But you could
That's-
fix it over
that's-
powder, yeah.
Yes, that's not Hatmana. Okay. Go ahead.
What about if you take this towel, it is covering on top?
And you should, so that's the second exception. The second exception is that only Hatmana if you cover the entire thing. If it's wrapped up completely in the towel or the covering or something like that.
Insulation.
If you leave,
Increasing the top.
right, if you leave a meaningful amount exposed, I don't mean if you leave open, 2 inches. If you leave a meaningful amount exposed, that's not Hatmana either. And therefore, for example, we do this happens in my house, we have a crock pot where the crock pot, the pot fits into, the round, base that it fits into. So that, there are those who say that should be considered Hatmana because the walls of the base keep it hotter. And since there's a coil in there, they're making it even hotter. They're making it hotter and you put it there before Shabbos. The reason why that's not Hatmana, okay, there are those who say it is. The reason why we hold that it's not Hatmana is because the top of the pot and the cover are exposed. They're not in the base. The base only covers, let's say, 70-80% of the pot. The top of the pot and the cover are exposed. That's enough to be considered not covered. If I take an urn and I cover it almost the whole thing, that would be. So you'd have to leave enough uncovered for it to not be Hatmana. So if I just put it on the top, that would be fine.
That's only if there's a heat source.
If
there's
the
no
heat source was before Shabbos, right?
If there's no heat source, you can wrap it to whatever you want.
Before Shabbos.
Before
If there's no heat source and it's on Shabbos, you can't do it.
Something like that, if you drag
Right.
a towel over it, and the handles,
Right, if I just-
the handles make it it's not touching the sides.
Oh, that's even good.
If it would be enough away from it, yes. Okay. I don't think it has to be, 1 millimeter is going to do the trick.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying there, the handles.
Seemingly. Yeah, seemingly. Yes.
So to write the question down.
What?
Write that question down, Rich.
Okay. Yes.
What's the CRC policy about using a crock pot on Shabbos as far as lining it with liquid oil or
Actually, thank you for mentioning because we missed it. Okay, which is for Hatmana, you don't have to do anything for the crock pot. Okay, you don't have to do anything for Hatmana. For Shehiyah, I forgot to mention this when we did Shehiyah. Shehiyah is you're not allowed to leave food on from before Shabbos unless it's a blech. There should be something in there to serve as the, so to speak, blech.
Separating the electric to the pot.
Right, so either that means is if you have one that's just like a flat, a hot plate, you just put a piece of foil down. That's easy. If it's one that has an insert, to put a foil around. Okay? Not for the hatmon of it, but for the shahir. You're not allowed to leave food on the fire unless it has a blech. It's in here. I forgot to mention it, that you have to put the foil as the pseudo blech.
Wait a minute, one of those insert crock pots, does the entire, or what's below the insert, does that entire area need to be covered with foil?
Okay,
Just a little bit on the bottom?
In an insert crock pot, the heat is in the walls, not in the floor. Okay, it's in the round part has the heat in it, not the base.
Not the base.
So the foil would be around the walls, so to speak. Doesn't have to be covering it from the bottom. But there's no heat in the bottom. The bottom is just empty.
My bottom gets hot.
Yeah.
It gets hot. It gets hot because the heat that's in there is spreading through
it's
the
not direct heat.
The heat is in the walls. That's the whole chachma of it.
Cover around.
That's right, a round piece of foil like
Okay.
that, not to come around like as a cup,
The insulator, not the pot itself, but the...
but between the pot and the base.
The base.
There's a base that sits on your counter that's plugged in, and then the pot can come out. So between the base and the pot.
Go around the base. The base, you have to line
The outside, the inner outside. Right.
Are you saying that you cannot put foil on the bottom, or it's not?
You don't
It's
have
not
to,
necessary.
if you want to. You can.
But if a knob, CRC policy, does the knob have
We
to
cover knobs, yes. Knobs, we cover knobs.
If you take it off, is that sufficient as well?
Yeah, that's just as good. Unless you have a pliers, yeah. The idea is that it makes it not easy to adjust something, yes.
For those that use a plastic bag on the inside of the crock pot, does that affect the equation at all?
So, let's think about that, okay? The person who's using the lining bag, okay, he's using that, I don't know if you're familiar about hatmana, he's not using that to make his food hotter.
Correct.
He's lining that because he wants to keep his pot clean. Okay? It's like the person who wraps his kishka because he wants to keep it solid, that's okay. if he was doing it to make it hotter, he wouldn't be allowed to. But I'm saying, we know that person does it for the cleanliness,
Yeah, he's
not for
doing
the
it.
heat of it. It's a,
Choke comes better without that line. I want to know.
No, the line comes out better with the bag.
Because you like flavors of a bag. Huh? Use a chew bag.
BPA is the secret ingredient.
Okay.
okay, we're on our last page now. We're on our last page, which is
Page 9.
which is Chazara.
And it's 5. We're doing good time.
They're doing very well. Chazara, which is the last thing, which is you're not allowed to heat up food. You're not allowed to put food, warm it up on Shabbos. You're not allowed to take food that hasn't been on the fire and put it onto a fire on Shabbos. As a rule, that's the rule. You're not allowed to do that. To do that is, you're not allowed to, even if it was on the fire, you can't put it back on, and you surely can't take food out of a fridge and heat it up on Shabbos. Okay, so therefore, that's what we do. That we follow that rule. Now, so then how do we warm up kugel for Shabbos morning? How do they want served chicken on Shabbos morning?
This is only inside the oven?
This is on a stove, any place, onto any fire.
Okay.
On a stove top, anything. You're not allowed to put food onto it. Sit down. How would we heat it?
Even to the side as well, correct?
You could put it on the side of the oven, you are allowed to.
Even though it's going to heat up.
Even though it's going to get hot, yes, you're allowed to put it on the side of the oven. Okay?
So
It's not written here because for a caterer, that's not the fantastic way to heat up food. You could put, it might be for a caterer to put like on the shelf, he mentioned before, on the shelf on top of the fire, that could maybe work, But in your house, you might be able to put it on the side. For the amount of food you need, you might be able to, get it warmed up like that. But for caterer, that's not doesn't usually do the trick. Okay. Okay, so to warm up the food, before we tell it how to warm up the food, remember that we don't want to do bishul on this food. Okay? There's an issue to do bishul. So before we think about how we're going to warm up food, the food has to be dry and fully cooked. Because if it wouldn't be dry or it wouldn't be fully cooked, then doing what we're about to say would be cooking the food. That would be bishul way back from a couple of pages ago. Okay, so we want to, we're like assuming we passed bishul. It's not going to be cooking the food. It's dry. It's a cook. So what can we do?
We're talking about cold food? Or
Yeah, cold food.
Okay,
Look at it.
it's in the fridge. I come 7 in the morning. What do I do with it to heat it up?
Okay, so first choice is leave hot water on from before Shabbos. Leave the pan of hot water staying warm over Shabbos. Excuse me. And then you could put other pans into that. Why is that? Since you're not putting it onto the fire, you're putting it onto another pot of food or a pot of water. That's unusual enough that the Chacham said you're allowed to do that. They don't want you to look like you're cooking and putting food onto the fire. You're putting it onto a pan of water that's sitting there, that's okay. Now for your own personal use, Rega, I'm digressing for a second. For your personal use, people who have made this is what they call a Kedera blech, okay, which is a very thin pan, a very low pan of water, which is effectively the same thing for home use. I don't think a caterer could use this. They don't get very hot. But that's the same idea as... yes.
Do you have her phone number?
I have... Yes, they sell everything else.
There's issues with that.
Yes, there are those who hold not the CRC. Rabbi Schwartz says you are allowed to use them. Okay, there are those who say you're not allowed to use it. Yes, Rabbi Schwartz says you are. Okay. Okay. No. If you want to talk about them off like this, we'll talk about that after. Okay. Now.
The pot on top of the water.
Yes.
Is that where if you have what they call a double boiler, it's a big pot and another pot slips into it.
Yes.
Okay. How much water are we talking about? Where the top pot will sit in the water?
It cannot sit in the
cannot
water.
touch the water.
It can be in the water, but it could be on the pot. It could be on top of the pot. That's fine. Now, the second way is, which is a variation of this, which is for many people even easier than the first one is, you have the blech there with a fire on from the soup from Friday night. There's a pie on there. If you take a sheet pan or some other pot and put it on, you can put it onto the fire on Shabbos and put your food on top of it, upside down, put it upside down, onto the blech, and put your food on top of that. Okay, so the first one said is leave hot water on from before Shabbos. Okay, this is saying is we have a blech, and onto the blech we take a sheet pan, turn it upside down, and lay it down, and on top of that pile on our kugel or whatever we want to warm up for Shabbos. Again, fully cooked dry food we want to warm up on Shabbos. Okay, and the third is another variation of this, which is if you have something that can't be used for cooking. Okay, which is to say we have a hot box and it can't get very hot. It's meant for warming food or for maintaining heat, but it can't be used for cooking. It doesn't get hot enough, and we've covered over the knobs or removed the knobs, or it's not adjustable. I mean, there isn't a way to change the
It
temperature.
doesn't get higher than 225.
No, two things. One is that it doesn't get hot. Second is that it's not adjustable, either because it's physically not adjustable, or we've made it not adjustable by covering the knobs or removing them. Then, if we did both of those, you could put food into that on Shabbos. You could put food into
Straight
that.
from the fridge.
So you can take
Straight
out,
food.
if the hot box is sitting there, leave it on. Obviously, the hot box has to be on from before Shabbos. And if it has these two conditions, that first of all, it's not a hot box that can cook it. It can only go to low temperatures.
I thought cooking was 180 degrees.
Not for food, no. I'll answer that in a second. Second is that it's not, at this point, it's not adjustable, either because physically it's not, or we've taped it up or something like that. Then you're allowed to put food into that. Okay?
And there's no waiting period. You can take it straight from the fridge and put on the blech.
Put it right on there.
You don't have
Okay.
to let it warm to room temperature.
Okay.
What's the reason for 225?
Because that we just, as a judgment of a cooking temperature, meaning you can cook food at 225 if you leave it there for 10 hours. If you put it, but the concern here is, does it look like I'm cooking? To someone watching me, would he think that I'm cooking if he sees me sticking a pan of food into there? So if I stick it into my home oven, it looks like I'm cooking. If I stick it into a thing that gets 220, no, people don't cook into this. They only warm in that.
It's a threshold temperature for
What is the?
that is the threshold temperature for cooking.
What is?
I think
So we're using that as a judgment for what would a person, if they were using a regular oven, if an oven was at 250, could someone do a slow cooking at that? Maybe they would. 220, it's a judgment, no. This is not written in stone. You know, if yours comes and goes into 230, then it's going to be fine also. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not.
But again, the point here is not whether you physically can or can't. The question, does it look like you're cooking?
This is not an oven that you
If
cook.
you see me put food into a hot box that only goes to 180, no one thinks that I'm cooking. Even if technically I could, no one thinks that I'm cooking here. This is not how you cook. You're only warming food. Okay.
So I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
There's a show, Peterson Park, that has a warming cabinet.
Okay.
Okay? It doesn't go, I believe, above 200.
Okay.
All right, now, we can put food in there on Shabbos. However, does that thing need to be kosher?
Kasher?
Yeah.
That's not a
Or
Shabbos
double
question.
wrap. That's a separate question.
That's
I
a,
know it's a separate question.
yes.
That's a separate-
We
that is
talk
not-
about, of course, part of doing the Shabbos event often means using
All
someone
equipment
else's
is
kitchen.
CRC approved.
Someone else's kitchen.
Right.
We're not talking about how you
No
know
ways
kitchen
around
kosher.
using it.
But yes, if it only goes, you said what do you say?
I think it's 180.
180, and you would have to then cover the knobs or remove them or something like that, then that would be fine, yes.
Right, well,
How would,
No, they're gone already.
safety thing anyways,
yes, okay. You have to remember also that in warming up food like that, it takes a lot longer to warm up your food if your only thing only goes up to 180.
They
Yes.
just want the sting out of it a lot of times.
On the pot that has water or kum, can you remove the top that's on there and put like a plate or flat surface
Yes.
so you can put things on?
Yes, you can. Some people do just turn the cover over. Then you can lay things in there. Yes,
Upside down.
Yeah, okay. Lastly, is if you have to add water to chant on Shabbos, we have two conditions before we say what you're going to do. The two conditions are the chant has to be fully cooked, okay, which usually it is. If you need water, it's usually fully cooked by that point. Okay, and second is that it's got to be, there has to be a blech on that.
Bring it back.
It's on a blech, okay, as opposed to someone, let's say, who left their chant in a way without a blech. We've talked some of those cases before. The chant is on a fire that has a blech to it. Then what you would do for that is you would not add the water to the chant when it's on the fire. What you do is like this. You would have one person or a couple people lift the chant out of the fire, off the fire, and hold on to the chant. That is, not to put it down. They hold on to it. So you have one guy who's holding the pot, and somebody else would take water from the urn, either bring the actual urn or take a cup of water from the urn and pour it into
You
the
could
chant.
take a cup from the urn and pour it in.
Bring
It
it
doesn't have to be direct
and bring
from
it
the urn. Yeah.
And
Usually we should something.
Shlomo says it's just considered a tool to get there. It's still considered clean. And you put it into you put water into the chant. While it's off the fire, you can stir it. We don't stir food that's on the fire, but at that point you could still stir it and get your water in or whatever you want to do.
while it's being held.
While it's being held, and put it back in. This only works, this is like, so to speak, traditional chazar. You take it off the fire and put it back. It only works if you have a bunch of conditions, which we've covered here. The conditions are the food is fully cooked,
Talk about the oven.
the food is fully cooked, there is a blech, the person has it in their hand, and they plan on putting it back in, which you do. Because this is the classic of how you would do chazar, is you take it out, hold it in your hand, and then do what you have to do and put it back into the
I
fire.
wanted to speak this one thing out, which you didn't, for reasons, whatever. If I keep my chont in an oven is not a blech. Therefore, if I take it out, I can't put it back into the oven.
I put it on the stove.
I put it on the stovetop that has a blech. But once something's removed from the oven, it don't go back in because there is no blech in an oven.
Okay, yes, any questions? Go ahead.
If the shelves that I was referring to.
Thank you for coming.
On the back of the commercial oven, commercial stove, are those considered a blech, or and you would have to put pans
Okay,
upside
shelves, say that
down,
again, shelves in,
shelves that are, if you have the stovetop on and you have a blech over that, those shelves are going to be hot as well.
yes.
Okay. Can you place things right onto that, or does that have to be?
No, if there's a blech over the fire, that's good enough. You said there was, okay. I see some people, if I can just ask, if some people are leaving, if any, we are
I'll talk to you later.
this is our fourth version of this, and we're going to revise it again after we process all these questions. If any of you are interested, we'd be more than happy to send it back to you, with the revised version of it that includes questions that brought up over here. So if you left your email address or you call Rabbi Eisbach and say, could you please send me it, give us a couple days. I think, could you send me the revised version? We're more than happy to.
Well, we will give a manual.
Right. I don't think anyone should make this version.
This version is...
With all due respect, I don't think anyone should take this version. There's so many questions, how many pages
So,
of questions?
no, the questions are additions, aside from your lemon wedges.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's some questions that you're going to make it a new policy. The policies of the lemon wedges make it.
Aside from lemon wedges,
So I wouldn't even take this one until you're.
if you want to leave it, we won't be insulted. Okay, yes,
I
go ahead.
thank everybody for coming. Should I turn off?